Okay, let's go ahead and get started here. It is 8/13/2024. I believe it's Elvis Week. It'd be the 47th year since he died, and yes, Elvis Week, August 11th through the 17th, in case you're able to make it over there to Graceland. We have quite a lot to talk about. We'll go through it all here. If you've been following me on Twitter, I've been very active on Twitter. There's a lot of drama going on, and it looks to me almost like it could be the controlled demolition of the alt slash far right. Some kind of a sacrifice going on right now. I'm seeing Nick Fuentes being annihilated by Milo Yiannopoulos. He's finally being called out for his association with the groomer and groper Scammy Davis Jr., aka Ollie Alexander, who organized the Stop the Steal for January 6th. Why hasn't he ever gone to jail? Well, it's because he probably has blackmail material on everybody. If you don't know who he is, he's a groomer, Infowars gatekeeper, alleged. I mean, it's pretty bad. It's worse than I ever thought it would have been. But we are looking at what could be the downfall of the Groypers. So if you don't know what a Groyper war is, I mean a Groyper is, they just declared war on MAGA. So Groypers versus MAGA. Groypers are an army of alt-right white nationalists, internet trolls, and provocateurs who are characterized by the frog. So Pepe the Frog. This is their big thing. They never really went away. And this is kind of where Q got its start, but it's not the same thing as Q. America's far right turns on Donald Trump. So Nick Fuentes announced a new Groyper war. The timing of it is peculiar, though. It's almost like he declared this war, perhaps to distract from this Ollie Alexander controversy. So Ollie Alexander is being called the Ghislaine Maxwell for Nick Fuentes, or some no, Nick Fuentes is the Ghislaine Maxwell for Ollie Alexander, which I think would make Milo the Epstein. I'm not sure how it all works. We'll get to the bottom of it. And speaking of Epstein, Donald Trump was riding on Epstein's plane the other day. This isn't a conspiracy theory. Trump flew to his campaign event on Jeffrey Epstein's plane last weekend. They accidentally used a plane once owned by Jeffrey Epstein. Accidentally, sure. The Trump flew on a charter plane previously owned by Jeffrey Epstein. Like, what is going on here? And have you checked on any of your Q friends recently? I'm wondering what's going to become of them should the prophecies not be fulfilled. A lot of insanity going on with the QAnon. In Canada, QAnon Queen Didelot ordered her followers to go ahead and start arresting, charging, and prosecuting people for everything from treason to what they call bribery, corruption. I mean, who knows how they define this, but yes, the QAnon Queen of Canada has asked her followers to go ahead and start arresting everybody. And she had previously riled some people up and had them attacking Convid testing stations. And at one point, she was driven out of town in her RV. So the QAnon Queen is still running amok. Here's a quick clip here from Candace Owen, who says she's shocked to find out that there's a Groyper war against Donald Trump and MAGA.
Exactly, Nick Fuentes said in his declaration of MAGA war. Is that what we're calling it? Take a listen.
Dare I say it?
Okay, as unlistenable as he is, I think it's kind of important to keep track of the insanity as they roll it out. So I'll go ahead and play that clip again. I accidentally cut it short. It was Nick Fuentes about to basically say he's mad at Trump because Trump isn't defending what he calls Native Americans. And this is a really weird speech because Nick Fuentes is describing himself and his fellow white nationalists as Native Americans. So again, he says that Trump isn't going to defend the Native Americans. Make of this what you will.
Groyper war against the Trump campaign until we can figure out what the hell is going on.
Now, you'll notice his affectation, not just his hair or his accordion hands, but his cadence. This is a very Trumpy persona he's adopted, which is kind of alarming because I think he just kind of went straight from school to the internet. And I don't think he has an identity outside of Groypers and Trump.
I'm declaring a new Groyper war. You have alienated us. You have ignored us. You don't listen to our concerns. We have been left behind. The Trump movement and the GOP.
It's all victim consciousness. This is why I disregard all the neo-Nazi trolls and the white genocide people. It's like it's just victim consciousness. It's just sad. I'm just amazed that this guy has any kind of real followers, but there's evidence that there's a lot of bots supporting all of these characters. But as we'll get into here in a moment, it looks like he's about to be annihilated, destroyed, or possibly, I don't know, brought up on some kind of, we'll see. Because Ollie Alexander is a criminal. This grooming stuff goes far back. It's pretty hideous, and Fuentes can't be separate from it.
But what about us? Charlie Kirk is to the right of Trump on immigration. That's unacceptable. So I think it's time for another Groyper war.
Okay, so Groyper is really hard to say. It's an obnoxious word, but just play a few more seconds. I don't mean to annoy you, but you have to remember this isn't some marginal character, even though he's on the far fringe of the political horseshoe. This was Kanye West's campaign manager. He had dinner with Donald Trump, so he's a fixture in the right. He's rubbing elbows along with those with these Marjorie Taylor Greene and all these right-wing reality TV show stars.
I'm on Twitter. I'm on Rumble. This is a big live stream every night. We have allies, so I think it's time to up the ante a little bit. Joker 2 is premiering in October.
Now that's what I was waiting for. So he's talking about how Joker 2 is coming out in October, and somehow, in some way, this is connected to the Groypers hitting the streets.
Joker 2? 5-year anniversary. The show is back. We're opening the chest. I think it's time for Groyper War 2.
Now, this just sounds to me like a preparation for some kind of incoming psyop, which of course will be blamed on you. Not going to play too much more of it. It's kind of repulsive, but he did say that Trump isn't defending Native Americans. And again, by Native Americans, he means, well, not him. He means white nationalists. Because if they implemented his vision, he would be deported along with his family because he's not pure enough. And when it comes down to it, nobody can pass their purity tests. Because even if you are pure, you can always just be a sellout, which is what they'll claim. Okay, let's see who's here. Symbia, 737, Ollie Goering, Josh Lebsock, Osher. Let's go. Gematria 101, Ted Striker 2112, Plain Decoded Breadcrumbs. Mazel, Linda Curtis, Ollie Goering, thank you for joining. We have the HBIC at Twitch, AJ206, and Leonard Dayuda. Skyfish. Symbia says this has to be a Poe. Linda Curtis says that setup is probably in his mom's basement. You know, ironically, he literally is in his parents' basement. It might be a big house, but his studio is in his parents' basement, and his whole position is based on his status as a virgin. Like he believes that he's not an incel, which means involuntarily celibate. Apparently, a lot of people would like to, I guess, go with this person, but he calls himself a volcel, which means voluntarily celibate. It has to be a Poe. And they're all Poes. And by Poe, we mean parody of extremism. So if you're not familiar with parody of extremism, it just refers to a parody that is so good that people can't tell if you're being serious or not. And with a lot of these characters, if they're just actors reading scripts, given talking points, then you may as well just consider them to be Poes, because clearly they're making their positions and this side look ridiculous. So Poe's law states that without a clear indicator of the author's intent, any parody or sarcastic expression of extreme views could be mistaken as a sincere expression of those views. So with this character, I would argue, and same with Candace Owens, I think she's also a parody of extremism, but you can't tell because they stay in character, as unbelievable as they are. T. Latte says technically we're all Native Americans and that we're born in America, but the black Americans are indigenous to America. There's a BBC documentary saying that. Interesting. Well, he's making the case, and this is part of the extreme white nationalists. You don't hear them say this openly, but it's all over the internet. They believe that white nationalists are the real Jews, and America is the real Israel, as in America was chosen by God. And they've been building toward this since, like, the Tea Party. Back when Senator Cruz and the Blaze, Glenn Beck, they were kneeling and praying for hours, and they said that God's finger touched the founders' documents. You can find all these quotes, but they were really trying to spiritualize the founding documents and glorified the founders as like these basically demigods. And now I see where it's going. It's all stateolatry. It's all government worship. It's all setting people up to worship their leadership. It's like an imperial cult. So Trump's cult of personality, MAGA, etc., it's an imperial cult. They worship him. They want to crown him king. But their view is completely skewed. And so when he says they're Native Americans, it's kind of a bizarre statement. But this also points to something else. On the far right, and the right in general, it's just 1776 is their code number. 1776 represents their ideal. Let's go back to then, or America's founding principles. However, the left frames their worldview with 1619 as the starting point. 1619 refers to the arrival of the first Africans who were enslaved here, dropped off in the White Lion ship, and that was referenced several times in Leave the World Behind, White Lion 1619, and this big reckoning to come, which means that 1776 was exclusive of what came before. But what came before never went away. So 1619 and 1776 are this left-right dialectic. Whose vision of the world is valid? Leonard says he looks like he owns a lot of sex dolls. Yeah, I'm thinking that this is an operation to basically control politics by gatekeeping it and blackmailing anybody who gets in at all. And that's what we're looking at. So, I don't think that Milo Yiannopoulos is a good person any better than this Nick Fuentes. I think they're all, it's like George Bernard Shaw said, never wrestle with the pig because you both get muddy and the pig likes it. Well, this is just a pigsty. The entire media ecosystem, the alt-right, it's a pigsty. So I don't follow any of these individuals other than to study them from the outside. And this looks to me like Milo Yiannopoulos is presiding over a controlled demolition of the right. And there are a number of figures on the right wing who espoused a lot of what I call MAGA ban values. And it's interesting to note that Fuentes is involved with Ollie Alexander, who preyed on young people. Because Fuentes has also lamented the age of consent. He says that when that girls need to have babies much younger and they don't need college or jobs, but they just need to be a broodmare for the state. This is typical of the right, but the age of consent. And then I see Matt Walsh, another big voice, big face on the far right, pulls over in his car angrily, mad about the age of consent. It's like, you're already married, you have kids. Why are you mad about it? And what they're suggesting is that the state has taken the woman out of her rightful place, the kitchen. And some other names, like even Owen Benjamin for months, and I noticed it all at once, and there was a lot of them. They were all complaining about women uncovered at the gym. I was like, are you guys going to ask for burqas next, like MAGA burqas? But they embrace this really surface and shallow version of like Islam in a way. It's what they espouse. The deep state is the great Satan. If you look at MAGA and Q and how it looks at the West and this intrinsic evil, it's pretty much a religious paradigm. It's a holy war. The incels are basically like the suicide bombers. You have Elliot Rodgers, incel, shoots up a sorority because Western women are bad. That's why they need to lower the age of consent. But all these alt-right people are chanting this like a chorus. And Fuentes was one of the most open about it. So it's kind of strange, or maybe it's not so strange, that he is surrounded by predators and never called any of them out. And this is where I'm saying it looks like possibly a controlled demolition of America first. I don't know precisely what's going to come out of this, but the basic rundown is this. Milo Yiannopoulos, who I talked about recently because he was exposing how Ye has been under the control of an evil dentist who addicted him to nitrous oxide, laughing gas, in order to expropriate his wealth, raid his treasury, and destroy his mind. So I've been following that, and then Ye's friend, Nick Fuentes here. So Groyper War 2. This is a comment Milo just reposted. Fuentes got called a this, that, and a pedo shielding test tube abomination. But this is what he's being called out on, that there are a number of witnesses to the crimes of Ollie Alexander. In fact, Milo's been called Nick's 9/11. He said Nick Fuentes is Ollie Alexander's Ghislaine Maxwell. So it just started. This is the beginning of the end, and so I'll be keeping tabs on this and see how far it spreads. And I mentioned, the reason why I mentioned Owen Benjamin is that he too is under a lot of I think scrutiny, and he's being attacked, and there are class action lawsuits being brought up, and I'm like, why are all these MAGA band types? Now, he may not be MAGA, but he's espousing the idealized past. You see, you have the left-right schism in everything, and the left believes in this progressive utopian future, but the right is hung up on the past. Like it was so much better 100 years ago, before civil rights and feminism. And you see that all throughout the right, and it's just happened in the last few years. And I only notice it because the right wing has become basically, in a way, it's absorbed, I should say. It's absorbed all the conspiracy theorists ever since Q. I mean, we watched this happen in real time. Here we are outside of media, outside of politics, watching the big show. Then Q comes along like a Pied Piper, and all of Trutherville just followed along. Okay, let's see. T-Latte says, what's a Groyper? If you have to ask, I envy you. It's basically the frog worshippers. Joined by Cy Girl, says he means Ollie Alexander and Milo Yiannopoulos. Yeah, Ollie Alexander, Scammy Davis Jr., poster child for Habsburg syndrome. He calls himself the American Oracle to go along with the American Shaman, but he was the organizer of Stop the Steal. Ollie says Groyper sounds pervy, Groper. I always thought so. And according to Owen Schroyer, Ollie groped him. And apparently, according to others, and this is why I think the story is fascinating, because it says something about not just politics, but media, and how prevalent this type of network is. As in, it was said that you don't get on InfoWars, or you don't get a guest spot, or you don't get to host unless you've gone through Ollie Alexander and sent him compromising material. And this was all talked about. I'm not making any of this up, and it's all going to come out now. I've been kind of waiting. Okay, continuing. Rocco Calzone says, hello, Penguinati. Yep, March of the Penguinati. Cygirl says, Candace can't acknowledge the two different actors playing the role of Derek Chauvin. Oh, she can't acknowledge anything. Her takes are very shallow, clickbaity, and they go nowhere. Here she is coming out saying NASA was founded by Satanists and Scientologists, or L. Ron Hubbard, Jack Parsons. She talked about this. The next day, she's back onto something else. It's like you can drop the most significant fact out there that should shake everyone's paradigm, and it won't. You cannot wake people up from within the box. And when she put it out there, she put it out there into the sea of irrelevance. This is why I say we need the parallel media. Because the mainstream and the alt media is so drowned out with just memes and narratives and conflicting beliefs that whatever you say doesn't have any coherent structure to adhere to. It all just gets dumped into the sea of irrelevance. But we're on top of that. We're on the raft. We're not affected by that. So what they're saying doesn't stick, and that's why they do it. It's to diffuse it and to dilute truth. Joined by Isabel Ann. Thank you for joining. X322. Maggart4822 says, Candace cute and witty, but she's another actor on the world stage. She's good at what she does. I would agree. Oh, well, maybe not. She's disingenuous. No, she's totally disingenuous now I think about it. But she talks down to her audience. She advances bad arguments. Like, she's not even a great polemicist. She's just a clickbait pro. And her clickbait game isn't all that strong. I mean, ever since she left Daily Caller, uh, I haven't really seen her say anything or cover anything worth listening to. In fact, I think they only had her on so she could say things that, if said by a white male, would be branded as racist and sexist. Now, does she have, internalized misogyny and self-hate? No. She's getting paid for this. She's getting paid to drop bombs. Lieutenant Weinberg says, Mr. E thinks Candace is an Asian dude. Mr. E thinks Donald Trump's a woman. And excuse me, but I think Barron Trump was born in 2006. And if you're going to say that Donald Trump's the mother of Barron, then Donald Trump was 60 years old when he gave birth. I mean, is it impossible for a 60-year-old to give birth? Did Donald Trump give birth at 60? If you're a transvestigation fetishist, please fill me in. Who birthed that Nephilim child? Do you think says these people are quite the characters? Yep. Elephant Tusk says, in a parallel reality, Tim Osman is a video game streamer. We pretty much are. This is a game. It's a strange game. The only winning move is not to play, but it is a game. And we are participating. And in fact, just today, I put out an open invitation to join the IPR Press Club, because this is where we get more involved. And it will be like gaming. There's this term I heard by the alarmists in the media called gamification of mass shootings. And we kind of do that. We have gamified this stuff. Look, the Buffalo attack and the gamification of violence. Repurposing elements from video games as a part of their attack. Kind of like the guy from the Christchurch shooting. He's like, shout out to PewDiePie. But have we gamified this? Yeah, we have gamified psyops and hoaxes. We have made by game it's interactive, sure. It's an alt-reality game, and we are participating in some level, and we are live streaming it. So I kind of feel like that's what we're kind of getting into now, is we're establishing a foothold on the world stage physically. So let me go ahead and just give you a brief rundown, and I'll post the relevant links. So here's the open invite IPR Press Club. I'll just play the video. It's about 4 minutes. So if you just want to listen for a minute here, and while I'm playing this, I'm going to go ahead and just drop a few links in the chat. Today is August 13th, 2024. Thank you for joining the channel here, Infinite Plane Society. I'm extending an open invitation to join the IPR Press Club, and those of you who are press pass carriers know all about this. The purpose to issuing these press passes, and this started back in 2020, was to give us the ability to document and reality test the claims of the media, specifically with regard to what was happening at the time. And it was deemed that media were essential and the rest of us were not. And I thought, well, aren't we media? Aren't we reporting? Aren't we making observations? And there's enough of us that we have, I think, a strong claim to this. And so I started issuing these press passes, which makes us unlockdownable. Whereas everyone else has to stay in their little home FEMA camps, we're able to wander around and find out if anybody's fibbing, which most of you know the story from there on out. In fact, this channel really picked up a lot of its membership in 2020 with the empty hospitals observations. So what we have here is a Discord server specifically for the discussion and the content building towards the various subjects that we're hyper-focused on, what we call IPR deep dives. There's a number of conspiracy theories we're actively debunking, as well as mainstream news claims we are actively debunking. But it requires more than just calling it out as fake and speaking amongst ourselves. I think our research and our findings need to be consolidated into documentaries, which we refer to here as the deep dives. Okay, so if you want to go ahead and subscribe to the newsletter, you can get the rest of the video here. And I'm describing here the purpose of the deep dives, and I mentioned that penguins, emperor penguins, are the deepest diving of all birds. But I don't ever want to be caught up in an echo chamber. And even though we may not be exclusive in that sense. We may become an echo chamber just by inadvertently going too far away, veering too far from main and alternative and their universe. So it's important that we, I think, maintain a connectivity and interaction. And so part of the Press Club purpose here is to gather content, and we do research 24/7 on a myriad of topics. However, this is where we focus. And so deep dive on the explanations for various misconceptions. And I plan on continuing our work here, but we're debunking mainstream psyops and alternative media psyops. And it should be pointed out here that we have the street cred of having doxed Q, and that still hasn't come to the surface. Constant Elevation, why don't you just email me or send me an email at infiniteplainsociety@gmail.com, and I'll track your book, or I'll just send another copy. I do have more copies of Autohoaxology 101, which is the framework that we operate from. Again, there is no platform for skeptical media. It doesn't exist. Everything contributes to the sea of irrelevance. So again, like you have someone like Candace Owens. Yeah, she's telling the truth. However, her truth is drowned out in a lot of her own propaganda, which is, again, framed within the MSM box. You have people, you have fools, lots of them, running around on the internet rather, but searching around for evidence that there was a second shooter, a third shooter. That is those who still remember that Trump was shot. Nobody seems to recall. They've moved on. But if you're chasing a second shooter, a third shooter, or a whodunit, you're lost. You're more lost than the mainstreamers. At least you have a clue, and you know the news is lying, but you just followed some alternative liars that were planted there. And we're trying to get away from those who follow alarmists, liars, and controlled opposition. And another thing, too, to be in the IPR Press Club is to, you don't have to have a press pass necessarily, although I'm making them available, but it's to be unlockdownable, one, but also to be a more active part of debunking these things that people just flippantly throw around. So those of us who are carrying these passes would obviously be those who still aren't under the spell. Like chemtrail believers, if you're still a believer in chemtrails, you're welcome to this, but the burden is on you to get to the bottom of it. Same with space station believers or chupacabra believers. So this is an opportunity to bunk your claims or debunk them with all of the resources and support of the Press Club. So let's say you join, but you're pretty insistent that condensation trails are evil. Well, we will, as a group, as a think tank, as a focused think tank, we will get you in contact with the individuals, the meteorologists, the pilots that you need to talk to in order to arrive at a better conclusion. Or to prove me wrong, which would be great. Prove me wrong. Someone wants to prove that Candace Owens is an Asian male, do an IPR deep dive. I'm not going to stop anybody from investigating anything. And if your idea is valid, you will get support. We've done this many times as a think tank, and we were not as organized when we started this thing, where we were funding, billboards. We were funding individuals engaging in various activities, activism, etc. And that's kind of what we're getting back to. Joined by Thomas Hughes. Yep, you caught us on the live side. Psyobstacle says Kim Boofers. Yes, exactly. And, I do have a minor point on that. I wrote this down this last night. Okay, let me get to my notes. We were talking about dysgenic groomers, America First's downfall. Oh, MAGA is going to have a major merchandise problem. If Kamala Harris becomes the president before the election and it gets the number 47, that would be better than ripping the name Trump off Trump Tower. Like, if you wanted to damage the Trump brand, make her the president. Biden if he steps down, then every single MAGA hat with the 47 is wrong. Every t-shirt, every tattoo that those MAGA rappers put on their necks with the 47, all the domains they bought, all the stationery, everything that they use that branding for, done. Gone. Worthless. But here's one of the points I had to make here about chemtrails. Because Chemtrail believers, 100% of them agree that climate change is a hoax. Every chemtrail geoengineering alarmist will say, "Oh, climate change is a hoax." And why would people believe in it then? Well, they believe in it because they have piles and piles and piles of evidence and models and talking heads. There's a lot of people creating a course that says this is the evidence for our claims. So they don't just believe it for no reason. And similarly, the people who believe in, chemtrail theory, they have a lot of evidence that they cite, studies, leaked documents. They have reasons for believing what they believe. So both sides have mountains of quote evidence. And if you're willing to say that this guy's evidence is all fake, then why can't the same be said for yours? And I think there is this blind spot that many truthers have where their skepticism is only applied to the funhouse mirror on the other side, and they don't focus it on themselves. And that's what typifies Trutherville. They are controlled opposition. It's not just like controlled opposition agents at the top here and there we can talk about all day. No, it's every single follower, every person who mimics and parrots those talking points, every propaganda mule for alt media is controlled opposition. They say you are the resistance. No, you're the controlled opposition. Resistance is futile. Armin Reese says, how about a panel on mental characters, narcissism, egregores, and related? Well, at this point, the IPR Press Club, the reason we're doing this is to focus on these documentaries, but if we could come up with an angle for sure. And that's why I opened it up, because you can float ideas. So if you go into the Discord server that I linked in that article, and I'll put another link to it here. If you go into this, you can easily put down an idea for a story, and if it gets support, it gets support. T Latte, Mr. E says, Simon Biles is a man, LOL. She's 4'9" and 90 pounds. Yeah, we've 100% debunked all this stuff, the transvestigation thing. And I don't care to get into it, but I have some pretty, I would say, conclusive counterpoints. I mean, I think I've debunked it. And there are some problems with it as well, with the way they frame it. They're not using real anthropology, and it's more of a witch hunt anyway. But I'll do a deep dive on it, because I have some things. I just don't want to talk about it now. I don't want to get too much into it, but I was doing some studies on this stuff. I was doing some research on some of their claims, and I think I came up with some things. And one of them had to do with cellulite on males versus females, and then I'd suggest that you look at these various actors, because it's more common in quote women, but if all the women in Hollywood are men, then show me the men in Hollywood with cellulite. And I look and I'm like, well, or even in politics, because they'll say Hunter Biden's a woman, doesn't look like it. Stormy Daniels is a man, doesn't look like it. But at this point, I think that the whole field of Mr. E is a government gaslighter. He's a Fed. If he was serious, he wouldn't be anonymous. Hero Paranormal says there's no good end to transvestigation. Actually, there is. It's a self-solving problem, because the people who fall into that are so confused that they're not going to pass on their genes. They're not going to reproduce and pass on this insanity. It dies with them. Gamification definition: the application of elements of gameplay, like scoring, competition, rules of play, to other areas of activity, such as online marketing, to encourage engagement with a product or service. And again, this can also be applied to mass shootings or to auto-hoaxing. And I've been talking about the AH 2024. If you haven't heard about it, AH 2024 is a planet-killer asteroid en route to the world stage. And I don't know specifically, or maybe I do, but I'm not going to say when it's going to hit, when it's going to impact. But it's going to coincide with the release of the IPS Insider and our Kraken, Raising the Kraken. And what is that? That is the IPR Press Club becoming an above-ground media network. And we're not regurgitating alt news. We're not trying to curry favor, make friends, or breathe their air whatsoever. I mean, who would want to be involved? It's like I said, it's a pigsty. We're better than that. if anything, we're like alien anthropologists, and we're just studying the infrastructure of their belief systems. But we're getting to a point, I think, where we need to go ahead and get more active above ground as they get more aggressive about censoring online speech. Lieutenant says, do you think Fakeologist is duped by Mr. E? Here's the thing. It's a logical fallacy, I think, that we're looking at here when it comes to this whole, or maybe it's more about observations and observational data. Falsification. So like for a theory to be valid scientifically, to be a valid theory and not merely a belief, it has to be falsifiable. So it has to be said that this would prove me wrong. Like, for example, I am asserting that all the presidents were women. Well, what would prove you wrong? An autopsy? X-rays? Photographic evidence? And if the answer is nothing can prove me wrong, you can just disregard everything they say. And their rules are so flexible that they are never wrong. I mean, I have been deemed a female many times by pretty much every transvestigator. If you disagree with them, they just put a skull overlay on your face and they say, oh, look, this is a woman. I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. The point here, though, is that they're not falsifiable. They'll say, well, Alex Jones doesn't have an Adam's apple, so he's a woman. And I'm like, well, he has a pronounced brow. Well, it's a brow implant. But then you see another example of a Hollywood female without a very pronounced Adam's apple, and they'll say, well, she shaved it off. So they always mold their answers at the last. You can never prove them wrong. So again, it's also I would call it a fetish. I call them transvestigation fetishists. Symbia says, if you can't stand behind your ideas with your real identity, what good are they? Exactly. And if you knew the truth about something so big, so vast, that it would shake the world paradigm, you think you would come out in front of it. The fact they don't is very questionable. All it really says is they've never been to a gym. They've never interacted with real people. And again, I'm not trying to change them. Like, let their cult run its course. But there's another element to it. It may be a purposefully planted psyop targeting the right wing so they can all be charged with hate crimes later. That may be part of it. It's a ridiculous thing, though. And yeah, Violet Penguin, IPS has more important things to talk about. Yeah, we have moved past these things. These are what I call truth or orthodoxies. So the fact that he falls for that means he wouldn't have a place on the raft. And you wouldn't have a place unless you were willing to back that claim up. And there's a reason why no one has. But is he duped? I would say he's chosen to believe something with no evidence. Does that mean duped? I would say so. Gaslit is the word. It's gaslighting. When somebody says, what you perceive is not so, it's pretty much gaslighting. And a lot of people are gaslit. It's mind control. Okay, let's move on. We talked about the 33rd Olympics game, and a lot of people are talking about this opening ceremony with this golden character descending from the ceiling, the Golden Voyager. And the way his leg is bent over, it looks like the Hanged Man. Here's the Hanged Man Tarot card, which I mentioned the other day. I want to just compare that to the 9/11 Falling Man. And the 9/11 Falling Man is one of the more iconic and famous images from 9/11. The photographer Richard Drew also photographed RFK falling to his death. We have these fascinating connections with these reporters, these high-profile photographers, and these historic events. But this falling man position is very notable. And then we had already identified, as in 2021, on our mind maps, we had already identified Tom Cruise as this falling man archetype, whatever it means. You know, the man who fell to earth, the falling man, Lucifer, whatever you want. The idea of this descent into matter or something in the esoteric, in the occult, the way they represent the Hanged Man. And Tom Cruise has already been attached to this. In fact, in his Top Gun movie, there's a 33-year-old actor who plays Hangman, who calls himself the Savior, God. You have so many references, and Tom Cruise is consistently hanging or falling. And the concept of falling has been associated with the number 42. Falling, gravity, descent, descent into matter, Saturn, 42. Just like Elon Musk puts 42 over everything having to do with his space program. And there's a reason why, though. It's very significant Tom Cruise is going into space, because when they're in space on the space station, they're falling. They're not floating, they're falling. So it makes perfect sense that Tom Cruise, at the closing of the ceremony, did a 42-meter rappelling from the roof. So he fell in front of everybody. Not all that impressive. What's the big deal? You're just rappelling down. Well, it has a deeper significance. And that's, I think, what we're seeing here. The Golden Voyage. I haven't entirely decoded this thing, but it's something we're looking at right now. Okay, continuing. Yes, we are live. If you have anything to call, it's 505-510-4226. Lord Laney says, reminds me of the kneeling Mithras bull. Obreek says, the plane crash in Brazil supposedly had 6 doctors who dedicated their lives to curing cancer. Yeah, there's something psyopy about that story. And I saw the thing falling. Very, very leave the world behind. Okay, let's continue here. I'm going to move past the quote Groyper War, and we'll wait until that develops. It just looks like right now Nero slash Milo Yiannopoulos is just teasing out information. So Jack Poso says, Kamala is now quietly pushing for Biden to step down so she can get Secret Service protection for life, even if she loses the election. Again, that would upend the entire MAGA catalog of merchandise. Constant Elevation says, in The Boys Season 2, there's a quick scene where Homelander is actually watching the movie Taxi Driver. That's good. That is good. So just a quick recap here. Taxi Driver inspired John Hinckley to shoot Reagan. Taxi Driver was the basis for Joker. Joker shoots Robert De Niro's character, Murray Franklin. Blood over the word Frank, or the name, just on F-R-A-N-K. Like Frank in Murray Franklin gets bloodied up, and it's Robert De Niro getting shot by the Joker. Well, the Joker's based on Robert De Niro's character Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver. So in these 2 movies, Joker and Taxi Driver, he's both the assassin and the assassinated. Taxi Driver in real life inspired John Hinckley to shoot Reagan. So you have these connections. Then you have Robert De Niro, totally Trump deranged outside of the Trump trial, going on this Trump derangement rant, and that's what caused us to look closer at his character. And that brought into the equation here Taxi Driver. And this was shortly before Trump was shot. And then, after he was shot, Season 4, Episode 8, the finale of The Boys, had an episode called Assassination Run, with an assassination theme, and the Trump-like character Homelander has blood on his face, and you see him merging triumphant on the screen. Good propaganda piece. After this event, after 7/13, Amazon went through and changed the title of Assassination Run. Again, 4/8. Very significant there as well. But the fact that the Homelander was watching the Taxi Driver, that is like very, very deep levels of meta scripting. Esteban says live, long live IPS. Oh yeah, we're just getting started. And we were just talking here about how we're going into the above ground aspect, which is way more important and than I can state here, because we're talking about quarantining. We cannot create a breakaway from mainstream and alternative unless we break away from all of the controlled opposition. And that includes propaganda mules. We're not going to be out here on the raft debating with people about ridiculous things. Mandela effects, Transdela effects, chemtrail lung, all that stuff that just wastes. It's a waste. It's a cognitive waste. It's a waste of time. It's a cognitive surplus. You just unplug from that. And what could you really do? And look at the waste of time, energy, and emotion going into chasing these Pied Piper leaders, thinking that they're going to save you. And save you from what? Please, save me from the fake nukes while you continue to promote fake moon landings and trip to Mars or whatever else they were talking about. I don't know if you listened to that Donald Trump conversation on Spaces with Musk. It was kind of a flop, sadly. It was a great opportunity, but they should have tested it in advance. I mean, this was like amateur hour or amateur hours. It was long. The position of the mic. I think Trump was talking while looking down at his phone. It was probably that caused him to have something of a like a lisp. It sounded like he needed to spit, like he had too much water in his mouth. But anyway, it didn't really have any impact. It didn't have the impact it was meant to have. But I think that is probably going to work against him. And it was more just preaching to the choir. Buzzing Fret says Trump is going to seal the border. Yeah, build the wall, build the wall. He's been saying that since 1958. 1958, track down, end of the world. The charlatan, snake oil salesman, Trump, promises to build the wall. And then he gets arrested. Sylvia says, not sure if this said last night, but Donald Trump has said climate change is good news, more beachfront property. Yeah, I'm wondering why more celebs aren't moving away, from the beachfronts since they believe in this stuff. T. Latte says Elon Musk is a bad interviewer. Well, they're both actors playing roles. Elon Musk knows at a very high level about the level of fakery and mind war engaged here, and so would Trump. It's easy to get lost in the illusion that these are real people. Some people hold out hope and they think Trump's rogue and he's just working through the system and he's going to expose it all. He's one of us. And that's one of the oldest tricks in the book. Okay, moving on. Talked about Groyper Wars, that's going to develop. And I do think it's really indicative of a bigger trend. It looks to me, it really does look to me like the controlled op is being controlled demoed. They're going to WTC 7 America First. And a lot of these right-wing propaganda mules, and that's what they are. Stu Peters, propaganda mule. Nick Fuentes, propaganda mule. Charlie Cook, propaganda mule. That's all they are. Their job is to disseminate from the street level and make it look like it's not coming from the top of the Illuminati pyramid. And it works. People are fooled. Okay, moving on. Washington Post journalists asked the White House if they could stop Trump's interview with Elon Musk. They were really nervous about this, but now I think they're not so threatened by it.
For you, Donald Trump, tonight on X. I don't know if the president is going to tune in. Feel free to say if he is or not. But I think that misinformation on Twitter is not just a campaign issue. It's a America issue. What role does the White House or the president have?
So they're worried about misinformation, which is not really all that well defined. But I also want to bring this up. The European Union threatened Musk with legal action if he didn't censor Trump. So we're seeing more of this heavy-handed censorship, and it's being justified by these alt-right pose. Cynthia says the alt-right was created to be destroyed, all part of the plan. I think so too. I think you have these parodies of extremism, these pose running around, mouthing these, I guess, meant to be incendiary, inflammatory talking points to justify censorship by mainstream society who finds these views to be deplorable. And this has been a setup. And that's why you have these ridiculous characters that you cannot relate to. They're not like anybody we know. I mean, Stu Peters organized some event where he could teach you to make a noose and do tribunals in your own neighborhoods. It got canceled, but he didn't. They're allowed to say things that we couldn't say. But they said here, this is European Commission, Dear Mr. Musk. Wait a minute, miss, isn't it Pope? Dear Pope Elon, I'm writing you in the context of recent events in the UK in relation to the planned broadcast. One of the things and I predicted this. I said, and this was last year, I was constantly saying, good morning, disease X. I said X was created to be the vector for the mind viruses that justify the ultimate censorship of the internet. That Musk is the leading supplier of space junk and now mind junk. And that he's a fall guy for free speech, and his whole purpose is to create this environment where they say, look, this person got caught in a Twitter bubble, like Richard Card, who shot up the bowling alley. He went on Twitter. He got radicalized in a Twitter bubble, and he shot up a bunch of people. That's disease X he caught, which is like the rage virus. It's a rage virus, a rage mind virus. And what they're pointing out here is simply that the freedom of expression is incompatible with safety because it might cause somebody somewhere to pick up a mind virus and go stab a bunch of people. And that's what they use these psyops for. So looking at this thing with Fuentes and the Groyper War, yeah, they're probably setting up a psyop to justify censorship. Meanwhile, these guys are getting paid to burn free speech. MSO Win says, yep, and everywhere in the US and EU are moving forward with the same far-right accusations. It's always far-right. They never say, oh, these far-left extremists believe that man is a tumor, a cancer, a virus, that man needs to chill with the carbon footprints, that perhaps we need to voluntarily, perhaps even, I don't know how far they're willing to go with this. Like, I don't believe that they're literally trying to depopulate us, but they want us to think that we need to be. Like, the right thinks that we're running out of people, the left thinks there's too many. There's a lot of misanthropy programmed into all of this. But the left never gets called out on its misanthropy or its extremism. Antifa, they call them peaceful protesters. You can go burn down a city and be called a peaceful protester. But the right-wingers have this simulated riot on January 6th where nobody died, nobody cried. It was totally phony. But that is held up as a reason to justify shutting down free speech, shutting down the right. And I think that the alt-right is essentially it's a honeypot right now. And they're going to use it to justify everything that we're seeing. And all they need is the public to agree with it. UK PSYOPs in full swing at the moment, says Andrew Selman. Yeah, they have to use knives because they don't have guns. If they're doing it here, it would be guns. But well, they do it here, though. And again, what my point with the Disease X. So Disease X had this idea of a hypothetical virus or something that would be the thing. Like it's a placeholder concept. So here's John Hopkins, Bloomberg School of Health. Disease X is a placeholder concept for a pandemic pathogen that has not yet been characterized. And they came up with this so they could encourage proactive measures to stop it. Well, I'm saying that this Disease X, this hypothetical, this placeholder concept is the mind virus. Brought to you by Elon Musk, who popularized the term mind virus. And if you haven't read Virus of the Mind, I highly recommend it. Richard Brody wrote this, The New Science of the Meme. And this is where they really create the notion that you can catch ideas, especially bad ideas, because we are presumed to not have any kind of critical thinking abilities. It's just assumed that society has mind aids. They have no mental immune system, so everything goes. Anything that gets promoted on the internet is going to find a recipient who will then act on it. So for the safety of society, we need to have our minds vaccinated. You see the parallel here. The idea of using the model of a physical virus to curtail, quarantine, to censor, to vax against a mental virus. They've created that. They've created this as they've walked us through this process. It started off with safe spaces on college campuses, which were designed to protect leftists from right-wing memes. Then it became mandatory social distancing and limiting the number of people in each building or house. And this was, again, to create a safe space against the transmission of viruses. Well, then, as that evolved, it was learned, it was demonstrated that the right wing was resistant to the cure. And they were carriers for mind viruses that caused other people to be resistant to the cure. So they created this, again, safe spaces to mandatory safe spaces to now everybody wants safe spaces in cyberspace. They want to be protected. They don't want to be exposed to ideas that might cause them to act in some way. It's like we're all NPCs. People have just agreed, yeah, we're all NPCs. And we don't want to be programmed by people who aren't licensed by the state. Another thing, too, Richard Brody wrote the program for Microsoft Word. So it's kind of notable here. You got Microsoft Word, and MindVirus are ultimately what? Words, memes. You got Windows, Microsoft. There's a connection here. If you look at it with this model that they set up a long time ago. Virus of the Mind, Richard Brody, the cover art has a brain being vaccinated. Now the term originally came from Richard Dawkins, viruses of the mind. But again, the main part of it is this. It's that we can catch ideas. It's assumed that you don't have the ability to not absorb it. That you are, and here's the other part of it too. They also say this. You know how you are a super spreader if you are healthy. Healthy people are a threat to society because they carry it and aren't affected by it. And then the people who have weakened immune systems are vulnerable. Well, they've used the same argument. They're always saying mentally ill. Why are all the shooters mentally ill? Every single one. They always say it's mental illness. It's because they wanted to make it seem, and they've made this case, that the mentally ill cannot protect themselves. They're overwhelmed by the mind viruses. So I can talk about this stuff all day, but somebody who's mentally ill picks it up and they act on it. Therefore, I need to stop what I'm saying. I need to put a mask on my mind. I need to vax my mind. We need to quarantine the internet because some people can't handle it. Dawkins lists possible symptoms of infection with a mind virus, such as religion. Now, he's very atheistic, Dawkins, but he's also a believer in every mainstream God construct. He's a believer in scientism, in the Church of Nasatology. So it's not even accurate to call him an atheist. But he's right when he criticizes religion as being the result of a mind virus and how it spreads like epidemic. But he's wrong in not applying that same framework to media as a religion. The people who are part of the MSM in the box don't see that media itself has supplanted and replaced all of the traditional religions. But the term mind virus was not really bandied about all that much until Elon Musk. Elon Musk started talking about the woke mind virus. And once he brought that up, the term became very popularized again. So Virus of the Mind, New Science of the Meme by Richard Brody, American computer programmer and author. He wrote the first version of Microsoft Word. Obrick says Dawkins calls himself a cultural Christian. He's a Nasatologist. He's a believer in scientism. He's called himself a cultural Christian to say that Judeo-Christian values are better than Islamic. And he says that these religions may have some value in the values that they hold. But Richard Brody also, Richard Dawkins also kind of advocated, or rather he was an apologist for some pretty bad stuff in his book, The God Delusion. I actually put it down. I tweeted at him. He described how, and this is Richard Dawkins, he would rather have been abused by a priest than have been raised a Catholic. I mean, a really strange thing to say. And everybody in the audience laughed and clapped at that line, which I don't get. MSO Win says it's incredible that in 35 years the virus managed to expand so much and more to come. Very interesting to compare how they began doing it in different countries. Yes. Yes, exactly. But they've walked us through this. There's no reason why we should treat ideas as an infection. But the reason they've done this is they had to invent the thought crime. This is right out of 1984. They invented the thought crime. This meme needs to be contained, because if it gets out and it spreads from this person to that person, we will have an outbreak of this, disease X. And it may cause people to, not recycle. Let me go ahead and bring up Hot Skull. Hot Skull 2022. In a dystopian world, an epidemic spreads through verbal communication. So a tyrannical institution pursues this linguist who's immune to the disease. So I often describe us as mind war inoculated. We don't have mind aids, we have skepticism, so we don't catch mind viruses like the non-skeptical media consumers do. They're all infected. And in Hot Skull, the virus is communicated through the spoken word. So the state has to quarantine society and mandate earplugs. Everybody's got to wear earplugs so you don't hear it. Well, this is like, he's not patient zero. This is the character they're all the government's studying this guy, the protagonist, because he's immune to it. He's immune to the disease. He's been somehow inoculated, and they can't figure out why isn't he going crazy when he hears all this stuff. And they call them jabbers. The people who spread these verbally communicated mind viruses are called jabbers, which might be a dig or a reference to the anti-vax and their dangerous memes as viewed by the state. Like, oh, they're going to bring us down because these memes cause them to not engage in the mitigation of this horrible situation. But Hot Skull has a number of connotations that I like. There's this book about revolution called Fire in the Mind, The Origins of Revolutionary Faith. And Fires in the Minds of Men by James Billington. And so I've been using the penguin with the burning skull, the burning head, or even the IPS insider, insight, like looking insight into this matter, but also insight has a connotation of starting a fire that spreads. And fire in the mind, Hot Skull, the idea was he was a threat to the system because his jabbering could cause this infection to spread. But this is what we are. We are essentially hot skulls in this system, as we are immune to the mind viruses. And a lot of what I'm talking about when I say mind viruses, I'm referring to constructs, hyperstitions, God constructs specifically. Like, oh, you don't believe in nukes? Well, if you don't believe in nukes, then you can't be manipulated in this particular way. If you don't believe in that thing, you're not going to comply. If you don't believe in this threat, you're not going to support this political action, or you may even be opposed to it. So this is why they want to get rid of those of us who have functioning mental immune systems. If you don't have maids, they don't want you. Okay, catching up on your comments. The idea of a mind virus seems unproven, says Tom Wax Bottles. It's just a bad analogy, or maybe it's kind of good in a way. I think marketing data would suggest that it is very well proven. The idea of a mind virus, transmission of ideas from person to person through a passive absorption. Well, much of advertising is passive. You watch something so many times before you actually make a decision. And I think that's what is suggested here. And if you look at the history of marketing, propaganda, it all presupposes that on some level we are very passive organisms. We are passive recipients and spreaders. I've said this before, that the mainstream and alt media are both passive. They're recipients. They're not resisting the information being downloaded into their minds. Eccentric Views says, "Good day, Tim. You're in the right place, Eccentric Views. This is the cutting fringe." Violet Pengon says, kind of like Bird Box levels. Yeah, Bird Box. Bird Box is a great example of predictive programming because it was 2018. But in Bird Box, it was just like Hot Skulls, but instead of earplugs, it was blindfolds. So you had this thing like the mask. In the real world, we had to wear masks. And then I said the mask was symbolic because it represents, I'm not going to spread these mind viruses. So you have the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. You have the Bird Box, where if you see somebody or somebody has no blindfold on and you're not wearing one, you can catch what they have. So everybody has to wear a blindfold. This is very similar to Hot Skull in that respect. And it ends up in a quarantine which I believe is in a home for the blind. So the people who couldn't catch it. Sort of like in Hot Skull, if he had found a home for the hearing impaired, it would have been a safe space where nobody would catch it. But it is interesting that that movie preceded the event by 2 years, and then we live through it, and then we have Hot Skull, which basically just explains what we were going through at the time. Three wise monkeys are a Japanese pictorial maxim embodying the principle see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. I have to say, Bird Box was a hard movie to watch. You're just watching the Sandra Bullock basically verbally abuse her children, yelling at them for 2 hours. Very hard to watch. Obreek says nukes are so 1960. Eccentric says you don't believe in nukes. What about dinosaurs? I don't believe in nukes other than as a construct. It's a war god that the believers tremble before. They genuflect. They hit the floor. They get on their hands and knees, the worshippers of this god, and they get beneath their desks and they grovel. They call it ducking and covering. I call it praying. But that shows their submission to this deity. Dinosaurs, I'm not so worried about either. Supposedly there are dinosaurs on the moon, or at least dinosaur bones, if you believe the science. I happen to think that dinosaurs are kind of like monuments that are backdated with fake, like for example the pyramids even. Like maybe the pyramids were built 500 or 300 years ago and they just backdate it. And I think it's the same thing with dinosaurs. It allows them to give us a creation myth and put it on their timeline. I think there's this creation myth for the secularists, for the progressive utopians, starting with the Big Bang and ending up in some future where we're a multi-planetary species. And they see man as the intermediary stage between ape and alien. And this is progressive left. They don't believe in God. They don't believe in angels. But they believe in aliens and the singularity and technology as savior. And in their paradigm, man is again trying to shake off the ape and embrace the alien. And it's interesting when you look at the symbolism here, because the left loves aliens, the right thinks aliens are demons. The left loves illegal aliens. The right thinks illegal aliens are demons. This is not a coincidence. They've perfectly split our society down the middle on these ideological lines, but you can go even further with it. You know, what does it ultimately represent when the aliens invade? Well, what are they called? The Greys? What is gray? You know, gray is the mix. It's the success of the Hegelian dialectic. You know, black versus white, the synthesis between the two. The gray. The gray represents the achievement of this one world order. When aliens invade, what always happens in the movies? Mankind unites. We either A, unite against the aliens, or B, the aliens come down to welcome us to the galactic brotherhood of all beings, and we're just like unified. But aliens represent a unification. That's what they ultimately mean. So all this black, white, left, right, the nationalist versus globalist, all these dialectics, and when you put it together, you get gray. And I think that's ultimately what it means. But I don't think they need to literally invade us with alien grays. I think it's the idea of destroying national sovereignty, destroying borders. So the alien invasion is ubiquitous. And once the aliens invade everywhere, well, what do you have? You know, you have this one world mass. And that's, I think, what the real alien agenda is. It's the illegal alien agenda. And I'm not anti-immigrant or anything, but I'm just saying this looks to me that if you want to understand what the predictive programming is leading to, there's no way that the people who are managing this circus can fake an alien invasion. Look how poorly they did with the Trump shooting. That should have been a no-brainer. But no, here they're preparing us, I believe, for the unification of mankind. And grays also represent another ideal of the progressive left. They are, by gray, they're basically part of this hive mind, but they are kind of like, I guess you'd say, an amalgamation of everything. It represents the oneness, unity, and transcendence above our carbon footprints. Transcendence, ascension through technology, above all the things that hold us down. You think that aliens have toxic masculinity and AR-15s and bowl cuts? No. Violet Penguin says, I think they're just, I think they are the virus. They're just twisting that they are not the virus. They spread the mind virus. It's like In the Mouth of Madness. In the Mouth of Madness is a perfect example of this, where this author's books are so popular that they change reality itself as everybody begins to reinterpret reality through this new frame. And if you think about it, replace book with TV. Replace the author of the book in The Mouth of Madness, Sutter Kane, with meta scripters in the mass media. We are already seeing what happens when total creative control over worldview is monopolized. And that's what we're experiencing. And in The Mouth of Madness, it's an internal change. People accept this new framework, this new premise, this new eschatology, or whatever it is. I mean, look how unifying end times prophecies are. Climate change, or anything that promises that it's about, or the Great Awakening. And it's the same manipulation. Telling everybody the world's going to end, or telling everybody it's going to reset and begin anew, it's the same thing. Ryler05 says Christianity is backdated. Cygirl says, do oil and natural gas come from seashells and dinosaur feces? Yeah, where does dino juice come from? Guzzolene. The Unmediated Mind says Trump doubles down. Oh, Trump doubles everywhere. Double couldn't pronounce S's and had a lisp on the interview. Oh, you're thinking the guy in the interview was one of his doubles. I notice at times he's way more robust and articulate. Other times he almost seems almost frail. Could have been one of his doubles. Or triples. I mean, how many are there? No, where does natural gas and oils come from? Is it all dino juice? I don't think that's the case. Could be abiotic. Fossil fuels could be a myth. Yeah, Jim Firebrand, gasoline and oil are produced by Earth naturally. Yeah, here's the myth. The myth is the scarcity of anything. Nothing is scarce. Nothing is scarce. Tell me what we're running out of. Like, I don't think we're running out of land. We're not running out of time. Clean air is not going anywhere. But they exaggerate things. They want to make it seem like we're in a closed system. And that's the main game here. The world stage, the worldview that we all adhere to, the consensus version of reality, it's a closed system. And the people in it have blinders. The people in it trust everything that they hear from the screen, if it's from their chosen source, but they don't, it's not just that they are giving an incomplete view by trusting only one side, or because you could look at all the left, all the right, and middle, and still not know what the hell's going on if you're not including in your assessment of the world the role of psyops. If you're not psyop aware media, you're not skeptical. And when I say psyop, I mean fakery. We're way past false flaggers. Like, that's another one. The false flag fallacy is one of the major guardrails, and I think we've done quite a lot to push that down. Like, I don't know anybody who still runs around saying, oh, was it real or a false flag? I mean, if I come across it, I'm like, hey, 2002 called. They want their conspiracy theory back. Like, nobody should be running around wondering if there's a false flag. Jim Firebrand says, why are there no people fossil fuels? They never talk about caveman oil. Good question. Eccentric says, I'm good mates with JLB. It's unlikely I believe in nukes and dinosaurs. Well, whether you believe in it or not is an interesting question in itself. Because I'm maintaining the position here that we ought to be non-believers. Like, why should you, when I say believe, I make this distinction between knowing something to be true based on facts and believing it because you don't have enough facts, but you just believe it's true because you've been persuaded. And you can be persuaded to believe in a lot of things that are not true. And we're in the information age, which means we shouldn't be stumbling around in the dark. Either you should know them to exist Or you should say, I don't know, I'm agnostic, I need more information. And that's where I'm at. I need more information. I don't believe dinosaurs exist solely on these plaster models and because I was conditioned with a bunch of cartoons. I mean, go back to your own past. If you remember, when you're children, your babies, it seems like go to any store and look at what they sell for parents to buy for their children when they were first born. Dinosaurs, dinosaur pajamas, dinosaur wallpaper, dinosaur toys, cartoons for kids, dinosaurs. Go hug the big purple dinosaur Barney. It's all dinos. What's with all the dino propaganda targeting the youth? Here's what. They fill you up with these talking dinosaurs. You love them. You're a little kid. You think these things exist. It's very idyllic. And then you go to kindergarten. You're in school now, and you're shown a globe. And then you have this awakening. They tell you, oh, the dinosaurs all died. It's a mass extinction. Like, I remember the first time I heard mass extinction, it was when I was a little kid. Like, extinction. They just drilled into your head. So from a very young age, you're made aware of the concept of everybody dying all at once, which never really happens. So the nuke concept, some mad dictator pushes a button, we're all going to die. So we're always in the end times. They've made that a possibility. Or a planet killer asteroid's going to hit us. We're all going to die. So they give you that story. That's like one of the first things you learn. Before you learn anything else, before you can even read, you know about the dinosaurs and how they all died. That's trauma-induced mind control. Deprogram says, I don't think Trump would use a double with Elon. He's way too smart. Elon is very smart, sure, but the character he plays on the world stage is simply that. Stuart McKenzie says, perceived scarcity keeps the prices high. Absolutely. And if you don't trust the news, if you don't trust history, which is really just the point of view of the power elite, if you think it's been messed with a little bit because the power elite need to maintain their position of control, then why would we trust them when it comes to the maps, cartography? Like, oh, I know they lie in the religions, they lie in the educational institutions. It's just lie, world order, but the maps are objective. Why would the power elite lie about geography? Resources. It's like the only logical reason for giving us a false model of the Earth, and I'm not even saying specifically flat, I'm just saying a false model where we've been given a CGI composite image to suffice for this is what the world looks like. Well, I don't know if I believe that anymore. I think there might be more land and that we're not going to run out of oil or anything. There could be dinosaurs on these other continents. Obreek says the dinosaur programming is heavy for kids. MSO Win says, I think dinosaurs is part of the programming to enter the mind of the child. Yeah, but I think too, though, the dinosaur story is tragic because they all die. Eddie F says, I'm sure Elon knows space is fake. He knows space is fake. He did Mousegate. If you remember, in 2019, December 2019, you had the CRS-19 module. That was the one that Musk sent to the space station that supposedly had genetically modified mice on board. And they said Mighty Mouse is going to the space station. That was the news. Futurism.com, Mighty Mouse going to the space station. So this idea that genetically modified mice going to space would be used to measure muscular atrophy, and can we somehow prevent astronauts from becoming weaker in space? So this mission is publicized. They're sending Mighty Mouse to space. Well, on the actual mission, you see a mouse running around on the outside of the rocket. And it's not just a mouse. Like, it's like a large, almost like a muskrat, but it looks like a Mighty Mouse is what I'm saying. And people will say, oh, it's just CGI compression. It's video compression. It's a video compression artifact. I showed it to Mick West. I said, look, there's a Mighty Mouse on the outside of this rocket. And he said, it's a video compression artifact. And I said, well, isn't it interesting that Mighty Mouse is on board? And Mighty Mouse is the cartoon character who can survive in outer space. And here you have a mouse on the outside of the rocket. And he said, nothing to see here. That's just space ice, and it's forming into the shape. It's just your pareidolia is making you think it's a mouse. Well, I'm sorry, but it's got ears, it's got a tail, and it runs around several times. But he wouldn't accept that, obviously. So what's more likely, though? Well, a mouse couldn't possibly exist at Mach 8 in space on the side of a rocket. That's obviously not possible. But is it possible that ice would form in the shape of a mouse and move around like that on that launch? Yeah, it's an incredible coincidence. But the people who believe in outer space were not willing to even notice this coincidence. They would turn away from it and say, you're just seeing things. No, it's a mouse. 2 plus 2 is not 5, and that is a mouse. The fact that it shouldn't be there is immaterial to the fact that it is a mouse. So now, the fact that it's there means something. What does it mean? It means that the launch was not live. Like maybe on the ground, they sent their blimp up out of sight, out of mind, but when it cut to the space feed where it's in outer space, that had to have been pre-produced. So we now know that it wasn't live. So that's a dead giveaway, and Elon Musk was a part of it. Jim Firebrand says dinosaurs, as they're presented, assuming they were real, probably died prior to the last cataclysm. Unfortunately, can't really know because history's been rewritten. A Newful says, Tim, dinosaurs are still alive. They're called birds. Eddie F says, it seems like the Earth is a big amusement park. It's been described as a carnival by a couple of, I think there was the Satanists in the 60s, the Satanic Bible, the author frequently referenced P.T. Barnum, and he used a carnival as a model. In fact, he described this realm as a carnival, and the word carnal and carne, meat, flesh, that this is a realm to experience the flesh. And it's very carnival-like in the sense that there are carnies, there are manipulations, there are games. You know, you have your money, your freedom tickets that you just get bilked out of for these transitory diversions. But there may be something to that. Jim Firebrand says, I don't believe it's the year 2024. Well, Masons don't either. You know, a year, it's actually 6024 if you go off their calendars. Bruck Bank says, I think Trump is being played by the same person playing Rosie O'Donnell. I could believe that. Do you remember that joke he made where Megyn Kelly says at the first debate in 2016 or 2015, like, Trump, you said that all women are pigs. And he said, only Rosie O'Donnell. It could have been an inside joke. Violet Pengon says, birds are birds, though, not dinosaurs. They probably made the idea that some dinosaur forms looking at emus and other birds. Yeah, that's actually right. And many dinosaurs look nothing like birds, only that one group. Yeah, exactly. What happened to the Triceratops? What bird what bird was a Triceratops in the past? But I was watching these road runners. They run down the street carrying like toads in their mouth. They just catch these frogs and they run. And they look like little velociraptors. And so I'm looking at it thinking, maybe when they made up a lot of these dinos, they based it off of birds. It's the other way around. Now, the question of what year it is. So MSO Win says, we're not in 2024, the dates were changed. I would say it's 1984, always has been, always will be. Linda Curtis says it's been 1984 from the beginning. A more interesting question for me is, how far back? Like, how far can we see, looking back, reliably? Like, if you go through your history books, just pick up a history book, one that's being used right now, something in 2024 that's going to be used in the next curriculum, and every single fake news event is going to be in the history books. When I say they make history, they write history, they do. The news benders write history. The fact that we call things out and notice things doesn't change what's going to be carved in stone. Napoleon Bonaparte said history is lies agreed upon. I would say the exact same of media. Lies agreed upon. Okay, going back, this is Elvis week again. Synchromorpheus said, I was trying to think of. Oh, this is good. This is from Gilded. So Synchromorpheus found this. It's Elvis week, the 47th anniversary of his death, and there's a lightning bolt right through his name. Looks kind of like Bowie's lightning bolt. And this all ties into the symbol of the man who fell to earth, or fallen angels, Satan falling like lightning. There's something there. Also, Trump started tweeting again right when he reached 88 million followers. And the number 88 has a great deal of significance within Trump's particular metascript, much of it having to do with Back to the Future, time travel, weird stuff like that. Secret Sun Speaks said, I thought he looked familiar. So the Golden Voyager at the Olympics does look like Frank the Bunny from Donnie Darko. That is an interesting juxtaposition here. Okay, moving on. Again, I'm scrolling through my Twitter feed. If you follow me, it's IPS Insider. The other day we were talking about Tom Cruise and his scheduled trip to space, and someone mentioned how in Gravity, George Clooney's character floats away, which might be predictive programming for what's supposed to happen to Tom Cruise. This falling man theme is something worth exploring, and I'll continue to look at this particular thread with the metascriptor, actor, producer Tom Cruise and what his bigger role might be. I think there's a role set out for him. I think he's going to end up like Yuri Gagarin, and he's going to be the first civilian to do a spacewalk. And it shouldn't be that long. It should just be within the next year. It's right around the corner. Eddie F says, do they have 9/11 on history books? Well, obviously. And the thing is, they will use the official story for every event. The conspiracy theory stuff never gets included in the history books. Obreek says 88 memorial lights used for 9/11. Yep. That's another one. 88 miles per hour, 1.21 gigawatts if you want to time travel. Back to 1958. That's also interesting too. So in Back to the Future, the years they went, 85, 58. Well, 1958 is when Trackdown came out. So we're talking time travel movie to 1958. Trackdown was the Western, the TV show with the Trump character who says build the wall. He gets arrested because he's a con man. So you have time travel with Trump as Biff Tannen going to 1958. You have Trackdown. Takes place in 1958. The episode came out May 9th, 1958. Now, coincidentally, or maybe not, Quantum Leap, a time travel show, has an episode where they go back to May 10th, 1958. And in that episode, it opens up in a taxi, and Donald Trump is in the back seat, and he's 12 years old. So there you have Donald Trump, 1958. You have Donald Trump, 1958. Donald Trump, 1958. All three of these movies. I think Trump Tower, there's a lot of interesting 58s having to do with Donald Trump, by the way. This is Futurepedia. 1958, Biff Tannen turns 21 and uses Gray's Sports Almanac to bet on a horse race, and he wins his first million. Saturday, November 22nd, George McFly and Lorraine watched the new movie Earth to the Moon. These are all really interesting. December the 7th, Lorraine and McFly get married. I'll have to go through these because there's got to be something in here. The Back to the Future has a lot of predictive programming. You know, speaking of predictive programming, do you think it might be accurate to simply categorize Q drops as predictive programming? Because that's what it's starting to look like. That the whole Q thing was, it wasn't leading them or the Q members. It wasn't getting believers to get ahead of the deep state and figure out what's going to happen, but rather it does have some predictive capability. I don't know though. I can't really say definitively because it's like the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. There are just so many drops and no rules that they can almost make anything predict anything. Predictive programming is actually very concise, and you can define it and you can demonstrate it. David Hazel says the controllers might be embarrassed with the Rona psyop, wipe it from history, and then it'll be a Mandela effect. In the 1984, they called it the Ministry of Truth, where they just Mandela effect the news. Eccentric View says it was 85 to 55, was it? Let me double check that. No, actually, we were looking at the dates when Biff Tannen, though, when he did his little trip. Unmuted Mind says, I don't think Convades was a failure or an embarrassment. They consider it successful. I do too. Like, we talk about these things from an informed perspective. But you have to remember, the masses are misinformed. They're fooled by this stuff. It all gets a pass. They have mind aids. Like, they don't have any critical thinking when it comes to propaganda. I mean, you can be a rocket surgeon and still be a victim of propaganda. Unless you have the right philosophical framework, you will automatically believe. That's just the thing. And for the most part, you'll be an automatic low information believer, which is even worse. Ryler says Marty McFly was born on June 12, 1968, the same day of Rosemary's Baby. That's intriguing. Rosemary's Baby. Roman Polanski. There's something there worth looking at. It's a movie about a satanic cult, and it's Devil's Advocate actually kind of has the same storyline where the husband sells out to the satanic cult and the wife is the victim. And in this one, in Rosemary's Baby, Rosemary's drugged and then impregnated by the devil on a boat while surrounded by Satanists, including her husband. Now, this mirrors a couple of things because Roman Polanski was later associated with drugging his victim, and then his wife, Sharon Tate, is murdered by the Manson cult, has the baby ripped out by Susan Atkins, who was a Satanist. Susan Atkins was a Satanist at Anton LaVey's temple. She did her satanic witch topless dancing routines and performed rituals in a coffin with LSD. So Susan Atkins was a bona fide witch in the Church of Satan who ripped the baby out of Sharon Tate. Sharon Tate married to Roman Polanski, whose movie Rosemary's Baby has Satanists impregnating against her will Rosemary so she can birth the Antichrist. Which makes me think the Manson thing is fake. And speaking of the Manson thing being fake, kind of a side note here, because I've been following this story with Marilyn Manson being accused of abusing Evan Rachel Wood from Westworld. Years ago, she came out with these allegations. I think that might all be a psyop. I didn't realize the significance of this, but Marilyn Manson used to date Rose McGowan. And Rose McGowan is the one who pretty much started the whole Me Too movement. And so the Me Too movement has some parallels with what Evan Rachel Wood was doing with Marilyn Manson. But Wood was also friends with Amber Heard, who had that public trial with Johnny Depp. So I think this might be some kind of contrived controversy. I mean, I have many other reasons to think so. I've already talked about this at length before, but I just learned that his first wife, Rose McGowan, who's made no allegations against him, was part of Me Too. So I kind of think that this Rachel Wood thing might be a contrived publicity stunt of some kind, which has some backing when you look at the context of it, because she's basically suing him over what happened in a video called Heart-Shaped Glasses, which is based on a Stanley Kubrick movie, Lolita. So she's playing the role of Lolita, Rachel or Evan Rachel Wood. She's playing the role of Lolita. And in this role, her name is actually Dolores Hayes, which is a mirror of Dolores from Westworld. And Dolores from Westworld is against the Man in Black. So the Man in Black in her real life is Marilyn Manson. So you have these perfect parallels. The Dolores name is key here, though. But she claims that she was assaulted during that music video. But in one of Manson's songs, he has this repeated line about the rape of Persephone being a publicity stunt. Well, what's the Persephone connection? The dynamic between the Man in Black and Dolores in Westworld is Persephone and Hades. The relationship between the Mad Hatter and Alice in Alice in Wonderland. Again, Persephone in the underworld and Hades. The documentary that Woods put out about Manson begins with this section called Don't Fall. And it's described that she first met him when she was looking over a balcony and he whispered into her ear, "Don't fall." Well, I think that's code. It's a reference because Persephone gets kidnapped by Hades at Fall and she's taken into the underworld. Well, when he said this, they started talking and they decided to collaborate on a script called Alice in Wonderland, which we've never seen. It was never produced or something, but I think that script may be a key to understanding what we were seeing here. She's put into the role of Persephone, Dolores Hayes, Dolores in Westworld versus the Man in Black. It's a bigger role, but I think ultimately it's part of a psyop, part of a marketing ploy. Sort of a tangent. Ryler05 says, I think Biff Tannen is killed by Buford tanned at some point. That's why he fades away. Well, Donald Trump is in his Biff Tannen phase right now. Tom Waxbottle says, the person that played the doc who invented the flux capacitor was Reverend Jim on the Taxi TV series. Eccentric says, I'm in Melbourne. We had the most insane responses, and the brainwashed people here loved it. Yeah. Yeah, it's important to always remember that the masses are misinformed, true believers, and low info believers at that. So their frame of reference is entirely different. That's why they think you sound crazy when you point out facts. Their heads are in the box. Deprogrammed Truther. Well done bringing the sharpshooter fallacy into our cloud of knowledge and how to apply. Yeah, that's one of the keys here, is recognizing what I call sleight of mind. Because they could do sleight of hand, they can trick you visually. And most people are visually illiterate. They can deep fake us, they can cheap fake us. The only thing that can prevent you from accepting one of these deep fakes is, of course, suspending judgment. But logical fallacies are sleight of mind tricks, and they bypass your critical thinking, and it's clever. These things are very clever. One of the most clever ones I've ever heard is, what are they spraying? Sounds like an innocent question, but it contains all kinds of disingenuous underlying premises. What are they spraying? Is it a spray even? So it hasn't been established, but they shoehorn into their question various things they want you to accept as established, and you do just by answering the question the way they framed it. Because if you say, I don't know, you're agreeing with them that something is being sprayed. You just don't know what. Well, the I don't know, or even the question, what are they spraying? These may not even be valid questions. Like, is it even a question? Like, what are those white poofy things in the sky? Well, those are clouds. Like, it's not even a question. It may be new to me. So it's a logical fallacy to appeal to ignorance, or to appeal, or to make an argument from ignorance. Like, I don't know what happened before I was born, therefore nothing happened. Well, no, that's illogical. I recently picked up a book by Michael Withy called Mastering Logical Fallacies, and it breaks down all the formal and informal fallacies. And one of the things that I find consistent throughout this book, which is kind of funny, is that it's constantly attacking conspiracy theorists over things that they're actually right about. But it's because the main fallacy that seems to hold the world in thrall is the argument from authority, specifically the authority of the screen. But we are an informed network of, I'm not saying media consumers, because we are media observers. Truthers are consumers. Normies are consumers. We are observers. We're not even consuming it. I'm not going to put that, I'm not going to eat that. I'm going to wait a minute and make sure it's not toxic. That's kind of the approach here. And the way that you suspend judgment is you apply a logical framework to what you're seeing. And one other point, you're not obligated to believe everything everybody says. You have to decide for yourself. And they want to guilt trip you if you don't believe. Like there's this group called the Mental Immunity Project. And I think this group was set up to combat us. I really do. For a few reasons. But the Mental Immunity Project, and this is from mentalimmunityproject.org, says here, they want to help people develop mental immunity to misinformation, manipulation, extremism, conspiracy theories, and propaganda. Now this says here, the mind has an immune system all its own. It combats infectious information the same way the body combats infection. So this, and I listened to a podcast from this group to kind of figure out where they were coming from, and it's very problematic because if they really did apply logic to how they consume media, they would disbelieve the mainstream just as they disbelieve conspiracy theories. So I think this is a doomed project, but here's what they say. Researchers have made a startling discovery. The mind has an immune system that combats information the same way the body combats infectious microbes, by manufacturing antibodies. We experience these mental antibodies as questions and doubts. This discovery could not have come at a better time. We need to fortify our mental immune systems against infectious nonsense that circulates freely on the web. The findings of cognitive immunology light the path to a world where manipulative messaging no longer divides peaceful societies against themselves. Well, I'm sorry, but this project's not going to succeed because our mainstream media is the world religion, and it's designed to create conflict. It's designed to have a schism that can never be reconciled. It's built for people with no mental immune systems. If people had mental immune systems, it's not like, oh, I'm not going to believe in conspiracy theories. If they really applied it, they'd say, well, I don't believe the news. I don't believe most of the news unless I get some kind of facts to back it up. And sometimes I hear people like Scott Adams, who is a cartoonist, from Dilbert, and he once said that he just assumes automatically that 90% of what is being reported is not true, and that he's just going to start with 10% and work his way up. I'm like, he's good. He's 10% away from being an auto hoaxer. Eddie F says, no more chemtrail talk. Let those people off the raft. Yeah, well, it's not about the chemtrails. It's about the logical fallacies. People who fall for loaded questions need not apply. It's that simple. And we're not going to miss them. There's a world of misinformed believers who are vulnerable and susceptible to logical fallacies and sleight of mind. We don't need them. In fact, at this point, we are actively quarantining to break away from that. But yeah, it's not about the trail. It's about beliefs. So if you're satisfied with believing these things are toxic, then you stop there, then what's the point? It's like, well, what about finding out for sure? Like, I would want to know for sure so I could wear a mask. And that's where we come in. The IPR deep dives and our deeper levels of investigation means that we will get the information where we can have conclusive opinions, fake or real. None of this confusion, like, I don't know. Maybe, like, I'm not confused. I just want to say I am the least confused person on the internet. I'm the least confused person commenting on media. I have not conflated real with fake. Now, I may believe way less, and I am fomenting a culture of disbelief here. Plain Dakota says your peers can be a medium for infection. Yes, absolutely. They can be propaganda mules, and they are an extension of media. That's why I say that the truthers are controlled opposition. So if you go to a truther conference and you look around, you are looking at controlled opposition to the truth, and they don't even know it. They don't even know what they're carrying. They haven't inoculated themselves against alt media memes, alt media mind viruses. And alt media mind viruses are simply part of the infrastructure. They're a necessary part. Eddie F says, I think they'll have a domestic terror story to bring in the digital ID to verify your status. Well, I think they're going to work on curbing the free flow of information, like that movie Equilibrium, where in the future they've totally clamped down on art and music and memes and ideas, anything that might trigger an emotional response in somebody. And that's where they're going. I think there's a number of individuals we could look at, like Maxwell Azrello or Justin Moan, various figures who have manifestos, publishing books, conspiratorial views, and they do extreme things. They set themselves on fire. They chop off the heads of feds. When you look at conspiracy theorists as they're represented, you're meant to be revolted. You're meant to turn away from it. Like, who would follow these nutcases? But I'm not trying to do PR for Trutherville or conspiracy theorists. Like, well, they do have a point. Let's take them seriously. No, leave them. At this point, we're trying to consolidate those who have already emerged from the box. And the people who are in the box still are useful to us because we can study them. I like to look at this as alien anthropology. And I don't believe in aliens in that sense, but if there were aliens, they came down here to study this place, they would see media through or from an outside perspective, not through a left or right-wing filter. They would say, hey, look, this group on top rules the masses by creating myths and God constructs and hyperstitions. So they control them mentally, and then their bodies are therefore in line. They're not going to revolt. They're not going to rise up because mentally they've been conquered. In fact, there's this term I used to use. I came across weaponized anthropology. I was doing some research on Margaret Mead, the wife of Dr. Gregory Bateson, who coined the phrase double bind. And a double bind refers to a situation kind of like a catch-22, where you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, or there's some kind of barrier that prevents you from being able to have meta communication or talk about how you communicate, the very dynamics. So the double bind situation or the double bind concept had been explained, according to Dr. Gregory Bateson, as possibly one of the causes of mental illness. It results in cognitive dissonance. And I'm bringing this up because he was married to Dr. or Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, and they had perfected this infiltration model where you can rule from the top only if you can get down to the street level and blend in. So you had this specialist in infiltration by studying man, anthropologists, Margaret Mead and her husband, and they were in the OSS, which later became the CIA. Well, this double bind concept, though, was introduced by Dr. Gregory Bateson in the 50s. Says it's the origin, possibly explains the origin of schizophrenia and PTSD. And he said double binds are utilized as a form of control without open coercion. The confusion makes it impossible to resist. A double bind includes different levels of extraction in the order of messages, and the messages can be explicit or implicit. and they can be conveyed by tone of voice or body language. Further complications arise when frequent double binds are part of an ongoing relationship to which the person or group is committed. So these are contrived situations in which the individual is incapable of, in any way, resisting against it. Sort of like false choices, in a sense. But the reason why he's significant and his wife, and I think these are interesting characters, is because I think if you look at MK Ultra, he's also part of that, and part of neurolinguistic programming. This is where you get into how the power elite really figured out how to control us mentally through covert means and through infiltration by getting into our subconscious minds, predictive programming, all of that is part of it. But there's also these other elements where the double binds, the catch-22s are thrown into it. Neurolinguistic programming, it says here, makes use of the expression double bind, whereby the recipient of the message is given the impression of a choice, but both options have the same outcome. So it's a interesting concept because we're looking at a bifurcated or a schismatic society where both sides are actually agreeing. Ultimately, it's a false choice. The alternative thought is a subset of mainstream thought and builds on it, and there is no perspective outside of that. So you're brainwashed either way. Choose your apocalypse. Nick Fingar says, how far back do you think the programming goes? World War II, Civil War, Revolutionary War? I think it's an extension of religion. And how far back do these secret societies go? You know, according to the Masonic calendar, the Year of Light, this is 6024. And this goes back to what they say is this year of, they call it the Annu Lucius, the Year of Light. It's where they mark their calendar, and it goes off of Old Testament lore. So, for example, 1776 AL is when the Tower of Babel's construction began. Well, 4,000 years later, 5776 AL, America begins, because that would have been 1776 AD. So these are significant in this world stage script. So it looks like, well, maybe the control goes back thousands of years. Whatever the case is, it's the same programmers. I mean, the people who are occupying those positions didn't build it. It's certainly not new. And I'd also point out that scientism and nascentology, our modern paradigm, is the result of syncretism, not progress, not progressing into a more enlightened and scientific age. It has that trappings, but it's more of the same. That's why I'm pointing out how most people are in a religion. They're programmable. They have no mental immune system. And when I said mind aids before this mental immunity project came out, where they're noticing it's a problem. Well, they don't know this. There's no way they would know this, but it's an engineered problem. They've created a society like this. A society divided among, it's like a caste. Are you a believer or a knower? Are you part of the programming class? Or are you of the programmed? And even if you are in the programming class, you're still programmed. 737 says, the older I get, the more I don't like people. But like you guys, I'm with you fellows. Eddie F says, there's nothing to talk about with regular people. Well, it's important, I believe, it's important to understand their limited frame of reference, and they're just not going to get it. It's always interesting to talk to normies. I like it. It never goes into these areas, and that's why we have this. You know, I've documented synchronicities and various anomalies throughout my life that I knew from experience that if I share this information with someone, they're going to listen, and then they're going to call me crazy, or they'll bring it up later, or the men in black show up and erase their minds. That's happened so many times where I'm explaining some truly remarkable synchronistic events, and then the next day, it's like nothing happened. I'm like, well, these should be paradigm shifts. They should be. But I realized it was futile until I got on the internet and I realized that this is a way to find people who have arrived at certain conclusions that are no longer being gate-kept by the people around them. So we talk about gatekeeping in media. Well, what about gatekeeping in your real life? Some people are herded like sheep into a destiny that they didn't choose, based on the basically chance, lottery of life. You were born here, so you have this religion, this paradigm, and you're going to go this way. And that's where they want us. But when I talk to the, quote, regular people, I just know where they're coming from. Like, I can talk to truthers, I can talk to wokers, I can talk to normies, and I can talk to people who are off-world stage. And these are different levels of communication. These individuals have different perspectives, and their situational awareness is different. But the raft is new, because I talk about the caste system, where you have the programmed and the programming class. There has never been a deprogrammed class, ever. Everybody's born into it. There's no unprogrammed. There are only deprogrammed. And the programmers are selectively deprogrammed, and in a very compartmentalized way, on a need-to-know basis. What we're doing is entirely different. And it has never been done. Nobody has ever attempted to amass all of the deprogrammed into a single group, into a new body. So you've got the mainstream alternative universe in a box. There's nothing outside of it that isn't controlled. In the 30-minute theater newsbenders, the journalist is moving up in the ranks, and he's finding out how the news is bent, how they totally fabricate entire events and write history in advance, 5 years in advance, they said. I say it's 50. But the higher up who's explaining to this upcoming journalist how it works, he says 99.9% of the population would not understand the conversation we're having right now. And he said, the rest of them work for us. So it's a closed system. You have the programmed and the programmers, and the only people who know about how programmed the masses are the people who are at the very top, who work for the system. All of the conspiracy theorists, the big loudmouth conspiracy theorists, work for the system. They're not outside. They're not outside of the box. So this is new, is what I'm saying. It's new. This is novel, and that's why we have to go above ground. That's why I want to get the press pass carriers active, and as I put out in that newsletter, we're going to be gathering in Discord to make this happen, because it's also going to get rid of a lot of unserious people, agents, trolls, liars, and who knows what else. Obrique says, I envy regular people sometimes. Really? Regular people duck and cover when they see mushroom clouds. Regular people put dirty socks on their face and are scared of their neighbors. Regular people believe whatever the monolith tells them. Regular people have a hive mind. But I've never really fit into that box anyway. My intuition, I think, protected me, because I always instinctively knew, and maybe I was just cynical, that news was lying. I just didn't know how bad. However, I made the mistake that everybody makes, and truthers still make this mistake. They think the media consists of reporters who are recording events that happen far away from you so you can see how it happened. They don't realize that the media are liars. And that's not a generalization, because even the ones who aren't wittingly, consciously lying are standing upon an edifice of lies, which makes them into liars. It's the lie world order. But do I envy regular people? No way. And because the masses are misinformed, and they have a lot of work to do to become informed, which would never happen at scale. And you can't even put your head in the sand. You can't just say, I'm not going to watch the news. You can try, but you can't go off the grid mentally just by tuning it out, because you have to become an active observer, not a passive consumer or an ignoramus. Because if you hide from it, then you're under misinformed. And you're better off being misinformed than under misinformed. It sounds crazy, but it is true, because if you're under misinformed, it means you're clueless. And what are you going to do? if you're one of the uninformed, when something happens, how are you going to find out what's real? Well, if you don't have the philosophical framework of the informed, if you're merely uninformed, you're going to be at the back of the line behind the misinformed multitudes, rushing to the stores to buy out all the toilet paper or whatever they're prompted to do. And I'm not going to be caught behind a stampeding mass of sheeple. Okay, let's see here. Mango Penguin says it'd be nice for these gatekeepers to gain a conscience. I think they're paid quite well. And it's not only that they're paid quite well, it's that they're insulated. They have no exposure to this information. And this is one of our strong points. We don't have to convince anybody. This is what I think wasted a lot of time with the flat earthers when they're trying to convince celebrities. Like, let's get some celebrity spokesmouth. It's like if you're trying to convince people, you're fighting a losing fight. We have to get out of the realm of belief and into the realm of knowledge. We have to know what's going on. In fact, I came across this really good quote, and I'm opening up this new ebook I'm working on with this. It's from Dune. And I haven't seen these movies, but I'm going to have to watch it because I keep finding all these excellent quotes. But there's this statement that is made in Dune, number 1, about believers. The mind of the believer stagnates. That's not the one. Let me see if I can find it here. Oh yeah, knowledge makes you dangerous. So he's making this distinction between believers and knowers, which is a distinction we make. And the mass media doesn't make this distinction because they only want believers. It's like a religion. They don't need skeptics. They don't need doubters or questioners. So Frank Herbert from Dune, and this is probably one of the better quotes that I've come across. He says here, "They are not mad. They are trained to believe, not to know. Belief can be manipulated. Only knowledge is dangerous." And that's Frank Herbert. And this is like right out. This is why I'm putting this in the ebook, because this is exactly what we've been talking about here. They are not mad. They are trained to believe, not to know. Belief can be manipulated. Only knowledge is dangerous. So when we are described as non-believers, fomenting a culture of non-belief, yeah, it's true. But we're not nihilists. We're not reality denialists. We're just not believers in lies. But we tend instead to focus on what we can know. Thank you for feeding the crack, Gwyn. Appreciate the support, Thirst for Truth. Thank you so much, because we're at the stage now where we are consolidating, and we're about to move into, I think, the best phase yet, which is going to be having an active press club above ground. And the press club members are going to be active in our own Discord server, and I think we'll be getting a lot more work done in a more focused way, and we can show what we can actually accomplish here. Rasal Haig 888 says, "If space is fake, so too is time. Time is a mental construct and non-objective." Well, when I say space is fake, well, you can't say that the area above us isn't there. Like, space is real, but outer space as advertised by the space agency is fake. But what is it? So their concept of it is fake, but we have to break away from their superimposed version and separate the real from the fake. Like, reality exists, the earth is real, but the model they give us is fake. So I'm not saying the earth isn't real, I'm saying their model is fake. So space, yeah, obviously. But when it comes to time, time is objective. We can measure it. However, their timelines can be fake. So I'm pointing out here that their models are fake. The worldview is a model. Eddie F says, "Please check out the movie Sleep Dealer." Sleep Dealer, okay. I also want to check out Doctor Sleep, which is a Stephen King. It's the sequel to The Shining, and it's about a baby, a psychic baby that predicts 9/11, which is very consistent with predictive programming. That The Shining has predictive programming for 9/11. People miss that because they're looking at the Apollo 11 stuff, but The Shining has predictive programming for 9/11. The sequel to The Shining, Doctor Sleep, by Stephen King, also has 9/11-y stuff. Sleep Dealer is a sci-fi thriller. Okay, I'll take a look if you want to give me some more info on it. Ryler05 says Stephen King is CIA for sure. Yes, Stephen King is definitely a meta scripter. We could say CIA, we can say Fed, however you want to label them, but I think it's safe to say that if you're a meta scripter, you're basically high-level intelligence. You've got to be. In Fly Me to the Moon, the president, Richard Nixon, didn't know they were faking the moon landing. And that got me thinking, that it's the programming class we're talking about with meta scripters, etc. But they're not all in the know. The system wouldn't work that way. Busy56 said, I watched the Stephen King movie The Dead Zone where Christopher Walken has psychic powers and tries to assassinate a Trump-like character before he nukes the world. Excellent. So let me see if I can pull that up. I'm just going to do a quick search. The Dead Zone and Donald Trump. Because if anybody is Trump deranged, it's Stephen King. Okay. Martin Sheen and David Cronenberg discuss how The Dead Zone, Greg Stilton, Donald Trump. Okay, here we go. Stephen King somehow foresaw the rise of a leader just like Donald Trump. Welcome to the Trump Zone. Fascinating. Metascriptor confirmed. And this would also suggest that all of his Trump derangement is fake. All of his Trump derangement syndrome is an act. It's performative. Listen to this. Beyond his obvious literary skill, he could also be congratulated for possessing another bizarre talent, the uncanny ability of predicting his future through his novels. So what's more likely? That he's predicting the future, or that he's an insider writing history? He's writing the part that goes into our subconscious, the entertainment, the part that fills us up with imagery and narratives and archetypes that can be tapped into later through the news. In King's novel The Stand, it focuses on a pandemic that decimates almost all of humanity. Okay, well, I'm not going to sign up to read his entire article, but apparently the Trump Zone. Stephen King foresaw a leader just like Donald Trump. Excellent addition. We'll have to put Stephen King in our list of metascripters now because we've got, look at this, a breakdown of the similarities between The Dead Zone and Donald Trump. And The Dead Zone came out in 1979. O'Breek says Stephen King wasn't a fan of The Shining. Supposedly he was mad that they changed the... I don't think so, though. I mean, looking back at this, Stephen King is an insider. Has to be. Did Stephen King predict the rise of Donald Trump 38 years ago? I mean, we can say this about so many movies and films. It's like, are they all psychic? This is where the synchromystics have got it wrong. Oh, Stephen King was just reading the zeitgeist. Artists, they channel stuff. Right. And Tom Clancy and James Cameron and all these other directors are just somehow channeling the same messages from the future. No. These individuals are programmers at various levels, and they're given talking points. It's that simple. So Greg Stilson, a ruthless salesman turned politician whose eccentric stunts and anti-establishment rhetoric helps him amass a huge public following. Greg Stilson, a major antagonist of the Stephen King multiverse. Fascinating. I'll continue to examine this And I mean, how many times have we seen Donald Trump? Think about that. Like we saw the Twin Towers or something leading to that in various ways. It's been referred to, it's been predicted. You've probably experienced it subconsciously, essentially. You've been drilled, the neural pathways have been bored for years before it happened. So when it happens, you just go with the script. And it's pretty clear to me, based on our assessment of predictive programming and how often they put this character in our minds, that we all grew up with this character in our minds. That you were prepared for the advent of Trump before he was Trump. This is another good example of what we saw with the Machete movie, where Robert De Niro, another Trump deranged guy, is playing the role of a xenophobic senator who gets shot as he rants about illegal immigrants, and he gets rushed off the stage. And it's like, well, that's just like what happened with Trump. He's talking about illegal immigrants, and a guy who was mad about his immigration policy shoots him. So like, well, that's predictive programming for Trump right there. But it goes even deeper, because that movie was from 2010. So that was before Trump even came into his role as a politician with these anti-establishment views, with all these various perspectives. Like he hadn't arrived at that yet. So in other words, this predictive programming pre-existed him in the capacity as Donald Trump, Biff Tannen / President Trump. Eddie F says, who told Stephen King the script? Well, obviously somebody higher than him. There's the meta script, the big story, is pre-written. And at some point, like who gave the crisis actor their lines? Who gave the talking points to this police chief who's going to talk about this fake shooting? Like these questions have answers. We don't know, but we're looking. But obviously, there's some connection there. Like there's this idea of, what is it, Project Mockingbird or something? I don't know if it's even real. But the idea of here it is, of some kind of like having somebody from the CIA in every newsroom. That's kind of the idea. News bent reality. Nothing new here. So if we can talk about them bending the news, or like in other words, fabricating events. Well, every fabricated event has a script. Like Littleton, Parkland. These things had stories. They have characters that merge, that step off the TV screen and become real political activists. So at some point, there's a nexus. There's an intersection or there's a hub where entertainment, where education, where the news media, and the political soap operas all have some kind of central directorship. So we are looking through Big Brother's viewfinder when we're looking at the world, because the world stage as presented is largely a construct of what they omit. And what is a viewfinder? A viewfinder is a frame that you use to focus on what you want to focus on and omit everything else. Like the fake history that we're living through. Yeah, they'll publish every fake event is real, but they're going to omit the truth. Rasal says, Stilson held up a baby as a shield to protect himself from the sniper. The Unmediated said, I didn't see the resemblance between Stilson and Trump. It may not even be physical. It doesn't have to be a physical resemblance. It could just be narratives. Tim, this is where it's at. In Dawn of the Dead from 2009, the deleted zombie looks like Trump. Okay, let me see if I can bring this up. I thought that looked like Jay Leno. I remember they made a sport out of it. One purpose of these movies, I think, is desensitizing us against headshots and gore. But I would consider all zombie movies to be predictive programming for a quarantine. And where do they have their genesis? I Am Legend. Richard Matheson. I Am Legend became the last man on Earth. But I think this was the book that started the entire genre of zombie fiction. And interestingly enough, the novel by Richard Matheson is about a virus that shuts down the world. So you have here a 2007 film, but it's based on the book from 1954. And then in 1964, you had The Last Man on Earth. And in 71, Omega Man. But the book, and I like the book quite a bit. It's called I Am Legend. It's about quarantine. It's about the last man on Earth having to turn his house into a fortress. And by night, he defends against the undead, swarms of vampires. So it's also the vampire bat. Bats are a huge part of this thing as well. So it's kind of like predictive for COVID. But it's all about how he has to quarantine himself. And then at night, if he survives each night, then he goes out the next day, he repairs the damage they did to his house, and he goes around killing the sleeping vampires during the day. So they're not quite zombies, but it becomes that. But listen to this. Neville explains his findings, including his theory that he developed immunity against the infection after being bitten by an infected vampire bat. So the reason why he wasn't infected is because he was bitten by a bat. So it starts with a bat. Now, there's a movie called Daybreakers, which I think that was 2009. And yeah, so Daybreakers, this one's great. Daybreakers, a movie from 2009 that takes place 10 years in the future. And in the trailer, it even says, or at the very beginning of the movie, it says it all started with a bat. And it's about a vampire bat born infection that infects the world. And it's got some references to 2020. It's got adrenochrome stuff in here. For example, the vampires drink synthetic blood, but the leaders secretly drink the stuff that contains fear, from real human victims. But one of the scenes in the very beginning, I'm not sure if it shows up in this trailer, it says it all started with a bat. And again, this is about a global thing. May have to go back and review a lot of these things because there's so many great examples of predictive programming that are very specific. But the bat symbol has been around since the very first example of this quarantine predictive programming. Slick Rick 333 says, how do I join the Blue Wrench Lodge? Either you go to the YouTube channel, Infinite Plane Society, and then you basically sign up for $1 a month, or you go to patreon.com/Infinite Plane Society, or you go to ips.monster. Elephant Tusk says, I went ahead and made dinner. Tim's still streaming. The Energizer Bunny of PsyOps streaming. Yeah, and we're going to be very much, I'd say, far more proactive than we've ever been. So we're going to ramp it up. It'll be like live streaming gaming channels, how they do it. Obreek says, in the movie I Am Legend, a Batman poster is seen. Fascinating. Eddie F says, do these people feed off our energy? That can't be real. There's another line of research that I've been immersed in since last autumn equinox when I went to this pagan event, because I believe in researching. I think it's important to get first-hand information. And if you can get into an eyes wide shut party, do it. And then tell us what you saw. And that's what I did. So I went to this pagan event, and it was at this park. It was kind of open. There's these altars out. And apparently there's a lot of covens around here. I had no idea. I counted like 9 at least. And I picked up a lot of books because I was interested in this concept, the subject, loosh, energy extraction. Like, what's the point of harnessing our attention? So I've been kind of trying to understand the theory, behind these various magical philosophies, because it's pretty much the same. Cross culture, it's almost always the same. It contains the same core concepts, just different terminology. And when I was there, they formed a big circle around the park, and they did this invocation from the middle, where they were calling out the 4 directions, and everybody was facing these 4 directions, and they're creating what they call a circle. So I was asking questions, And I was told that when they create a circle, that any kind of energy emitted from the people within is contained within that circle. And that the person who officiates or who is speaking, and it's something about the power of words and the spell, the person that is speaking their will or the collective will into being is harnessing all of this emoted energy into some kind of transmutable force, that it's a harvest. And that's the essential theory behind it. And so I was getting some books on the subject, and I picked up a few, and I was reading about magic circles. And again, it seems to be, at least if the theory behind any of these things has any reality to it, there's this consistent belief that it's like a cliche where attention goes, energy flows, but it might be true. That your sentience, your consciousness, might be what powers the universe itself. And let's say hypothetically that's true. If true, if human will is more than just need fulfillment and cognitive bias to get you what you need to get through the day, if your willpower is actually a co-creative power, then it explains everything about witchcraft, about magic, and all these various magical philosophies. And they all seem to believe it and have for a long time. So are they extracting our energy? Well, they're getting your attention, and you're paying attention. Now, what are they doing with it? Well, spell casting is based on the idea of projecting a vision into reality by implanting it into your imagination. So here you are watching movies, and you're having your imagination filled with things. You're having narratives, which are spells, memes, sigils, and this idea of programming us to behave in certain ways, at a very basic level, that's magic. Lesser magic, manipulation, but higher magic refers to what they're doing with your consciousness and how that affects outcomes or probability or reality. So it does seem to me that we may exist in a big magical circle, that we may be in a extraction matrix of some kind. So they may be taking your adrenochrome, but they're not literally extracting it from your brains, but they're taking it from your mind. This reminds me of I got to bring this up. There was this live performance of Chromatica. I think it was the year before the Floyd thing, so it was like 5/25/2019, where Lady Gaga performs a song called Chromatica on stage. And I called it Adrenochromatica because she was performing in front of this piano that looked like a brain, like a big giant brain. And she had these like clawed hands. So she has these clawed Freddy Krueger scissor hands, and she's on this purple, which is a color associated with adrenochrome. She's like playing on this purple piano, singing the song, and it almost seems like she's reaching into somebody's brain and pulling out the pineal gland. That's how I interpreted this. But anyway, the concept of energy extraction, of some kind of vampiric presence in this world, I think it's likely. I mean, they're not just doing this for fun. Elephant Tusk says the Archons only feed on extremely negative emotions. Is that true? I think they feed off both. Because, and I said I've been studying these various magical philosophies. I have a few books on what people refer to as voodoo, which isn't even the right term, but that belief system is premised on the idea that man is an intermediary between gods and the world, and that you interact with the gods through libations, which are offerings. And you don't just dump the offerings on the ground or throw them into a volcano, you imbibe them. So you'll see the consumption of rum and cigars, for example, as some kind of communion. Like Catholic communion, the bread, the wine. So the idea of Eucharist and consuming the gods is not really all that new. But this idea is that when you are invoking them and you're providing the libations, they inhabit you. And so these are celebrations. So they're feeding the entities through parties, basically. It looks like a party. A lot of dancing, a lot of music, a lot of drugs, all being used to please the gods and gain their favor. The idea of Hollywood voodoo, it's always like negative, killing things, and it's very dark and nefarious, but that's not really how it's done. But there are different methods. I was studying this, I have this book on Apollo. It's a form of practice that involves self-flagellation and cutting, like as in like using pain in their initiations, like months and months and months of pain, in order to gain contact with an entity that will guide you, for example. But the consistent thing here is the emotion, or the energy extraction, positive or negative. Slickrick333 says, any believers in the July 13th Butler, Pennsylvania? Yeah, does anybody believe that that was anything more than a magic trick? It wasn't a psyop. Nobody died. Nobody cried. It was a magic trick. Elephant Tusk says, the Archons were created by the Demiurge. They serve as the prison wardens of our false construct universe. Fascinating. I don't know. You know, the reason why I'm studying it is I think that one of the things that guardrails people against understanding this is this false dialectic of God, Satan, or Jesus, Lucifer. It's like, no, I don't think that's how it works. Not from their perspective. Like if you look at the occult and their symbolism, it's not that simple. It's more pantheistic and animistic. Rasal Haig 888 says, a cheap magic trick. Absolutely. I'm almost insulted. But the normies believed it. Infinite Play prank call. Or maybe that was a believer. If you believe Trump got his ear pierced by an AR-15, please call in. I think they believe in cosmism. And cosmism is like nothing is new. Everything's recycled in this world, even our paradigms. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hello, Tim.
Hey, how you doing? Thank you for calling.
All right. I was commenting here about space and time being an illusion as well, and there's a scientific reason for that. Because Stephen Hawking, in his brief history of time, he spoke of three species of time, or kinds of time: the cosmological, the thermodynamic, and the psychological. But seeing as our sense of the cosmological and thermodynamic are rooted in our cognitive sense, psychology, ultimately, all time and space is a psychological construct, when you think about it. And the metascriptors, as fake as they are, they themselves are actually generated by a greater superscript. So just leave you with that thought. It was, anyhow, great show. Keep it going. Talk to you later.
Okay, I appreciate that very much. And yeah, you know, in the 30-minute play, The Newsbenders, they posit that there's a supercomputer at the very top of it. I kind of doubt that. I think it's a man behind a curtain. I think that it's a committee, it's a small group who inherited the position, but they would like you to believe that there's a demiurge in the machine. You know, like in the movie The Village. They keep the people in the village because they believe there's monsters in the wilderness. And it's like, no, there aren't any monsters. These are the elders dressed up as monsters. But it's convenient. I mean, talk about an alibi. Oh, I didn't hack the computer. It was gremlins. Or we didn't fabricate history. It was the universe. Eddie F. says, I thought we don't believe in gods. Yeah, I'm not a believer. But there are gods, as in God constructs. And even in these magical philosophies, they don't believe in these gods. Look at Aleister Crowley wrote. He said that they don't believe in the objective existence of angels or demons or planetary elemental energies, etc., but rather that belief is a tool for conceptualizing abstract energies and somehow commanding them with the spoken word. So Aleister Crowley has a really bad reputation. Most of it's made up and fake, which you can prove. Most of it's euphemism. But he made it a point that here's actually the actual quote here. I'm not going to give my email address to get a quote. Aleister Crowley. Okay, in this book it is spoken of the paths, the spirits, conjurations, gods, spheres, and many other things. I have this from the Hermetic Library blog. I found the full quote. So the rest of it is, which may or may not exist. It's immaterial whether these things exist or not. By doing certain things, results follow. Students are warned against attributing objective reality or philosophic validity to any of them. So the insiders in his cult were told that they don't believe in these things. Like, you know how it's said that the Scientologists believe in Xenu, the alien? There's no way they really believe in this stuff. These are just placeholder constructs. These are ways of characterizing elemental or forces or energies in a way that you can talk about them and talk to them, because they operate on the premise that you can talk to, that you can speak to, communicate with the universe, which they call conversation with the higher self. There's actually this term for it where they believe that with your intuition, you're actually interfacing with the universe and communicating to it. And in order to communicate to it, you need a programming language. You need to be a coder. You need to understand the source code. Eddie F says it's confusing. We talk about energy extraction. I don't know any humans live off energy. We need solid food for energy. It's not in that sense, though. For example, we're looking at this, and I'm not saying I'm a believer in it. I'm just saying this is what is believed. Like, do you believe in the power of prayer, for example? Whether or not you do, the mechanism there is somebody is earnestly speaking what they want to happen to the universe in hopes that there's some kind of a response. And so there's a focused attention. Now that focused attention is you giving your energy. Like every second that you're alive, you're giving your energy to something. You're focused. Your co-creative energy, whether it's to build something, take something apart, learn something, change something. So there is some kind of exchange between you and this reality. And we could call this an energetic exchange. And these terms are, of course, not scientific. This is not necessarily objective, but this is the best terminology that we have. And this idea that you could measure it in some way. Well, you can. There's a difference between laser-focused concentration and half-assed passively watching the news. And it seems to be that the power elite use media to put yokes around our minds and get us to focus our attention where they want us to focus, so we build what they want us to build. But I don't get into the whole new agey stuff where people are like, oh, it's all the law of attraction. You just think it and it happens. You just believe it. That doesn't happen. I don't believe that's true. It's not, you can't prove it, but people will say that's true. Like, oh, I manifest my reality. Oh, really? You're a genie? And this is what you've done with your wishes? But what I will say, though, is that there are many people who believe in these various magical philosophies or the more common prayer version of things who have subjective experiences that suggest something. And based on what I've researched here, I would say that any objective results you get from any kind of, quote, magic is the result of you. But if you're praying because you've gone to a mainstream church, you're going to attribute it to the God that they told you to believe in, their God construct. So in a way, I hate to say it, but it seems like religion might be controlled opposition to spirituality and co-creation. It might be there to steal and harvest your, quote, energy. Come pray to my idol. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hello, Tim. It's me again. Okay. You're Tim Osman, right?
Yeah. What? Yeah. You just called a moment ago.
Okay,
Yes.
that's right. That was me. And someone said it was the shortest call on record. That was pretty funny. I wanted to keep it short, but now I just want to raise another thing to ponder. Your name, Tim Osmond, that's an avatar, right?
I think the word is moniker.
Well, whatever you want to call it, the essence is the same thing. You've created an entity, and it represents you, right?
Yeah. Go on. Go on.
Yeah. Likewise, we ourselves, at least some that know, are avatars from the realm that's not the microcosmic cyber realm that Tim Osmond or any other avatar exists in. Tim Osmond doesn't have any knowledge of itself, only you have knowledge of him. See?
Well, I will say this: the metaverse is one thing, and that's the model that we live in. And metaverse is the commons. It's like the commons that we all passively accept as this is the world. But the meatverse is entirely different. And the reason why I'm raising the Infinite Plane Radio's press club, the IPR press club, the reason why I'm bringing this out into the open and above ground is that we need to occupy the meatverse because we have more weight here than the metaverse. And the people in the metaverse are easier to control. If your entire existence or if your entire channel is telling the truth, but you only exist on YouTube, you can be deleted and you will not be in the history books. But if you get out in the real world and make some real waves in the meatverse, you're more difficult to erase. And they would prefer that we stay in. They would prefer that we stay in the metaverse.
This is true. This is quite true. But even the meatverse, as individuals, a lot of people get erased, and there is no record of them either. It has this parallel, you see.
Well, no, the meatverse exists though. It's real.
Oh, it does. I'm not questioning the existence of it. I'm saying the nature of it is not really, in principle, any different. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that there's no distinction, but the parallel is there.
Well, one is an interpretation, though, and people live in the interpretation. The map is not the territory. And I'm saying that we are the only media organization that exists in the territory and looks at the map as such. Everyone else believes the map is the territory.
Agreed. And now the parallel is when we play these online games, we got the PCs, the NPCs, and then we also have what they call the player killers, the PKs.
And who are the player killers?
Let's see now. I'm sure you know.
I don't necessarily, but I'm interested. But yeah, look, the world is NPCs who are non-player characters, and what that simply means is that they are going along with the programming in the script. Like Truman was an NPC until he became the main character in his own movie.
So it's all about an awakening.
Yeah, stepping out from behind the screen, leaving the Truman Show.
Right. So he was able to do it only because his circumstances compelled him to.
Well, no, he had a discrepancy. He had a glitch in the Matrix. He hears
That's right.
But if you look at it also, though, from the esoteric perspective, he's the fool. And his fool's journey begins when he sees the dog star. And of course, the movie doesn't explicitly state the meaning of it.
The light that said Sirius, on it that came crashing to the ground, right?
Yep, that precipitated his awakening.
That's right. That was the moment he said, wait a minute, what's going on here? So that was his first clue right there. And that's what set his journey in motion. But that has its parallel because it'll happen to just about every one of us, some sooner than later. And then, of course, in the case of the NPCs, some of them, it never happens. So what I'm getting at is that we enter into the funhouse and then forget that we're in the funhouse. Because if we had any memory of where we were before the funhouse wouldn't be so much fun.
Yeah, a lot of people are disappointed in the psyops once they figure out it's all fake because it doesn't have the same engagement. It's no longer a threat. Like there's like when you find out nukes are fake, like that's good news. or that a bunch of people weren't actually killed. And people are like mad about this stuff. They're mad that these bad things aren't real. And it's because we're taking a lot of the gravitas out of everything. And is that bad? It depends. I think it's
Oh, no, I wouldn't say it's bad or good, but what I would say is that we give it as much reality as we choose to give it. It's about attachment, right? It's all about attachment.
Sure. But again, this is new. There have never been deprogrammed people. And I mean, at the level we are, at the level accessible to us, until recent years, and that's only because a lot of us have gone against the grain of the establishment-approved free thinkers. But my objective here is I'm trying to make sure that we stick with objective reality. That's why I don't have any room for entertaining the idea that this is all performed by a higher power, a demiurge, or aliens. I'm like, no, let's get into the scripting, the writers, and the production companies.
I wouldn't say. Yeah, I'm not saying that the demiurge or some entity other than ourselves is involved. What I'm saying is that we ourselves are governing the experience. Ultimately, it resides within each and every one of us.
Is that true? I mean, can you demonstrate it? Because a lot of people will say they manifest their realities, and I'm like, well, let me see.
I'm demonstrating it right now because I know I don't really actually exist, even though you hear me speaking to you.
Okay, you don't exist in what sense, though? You exist in the objective sense that I can hear you, but in what sense do you not exist?
That's correct. Well, okay, how about this? Consider the case of a comatose patient who has been gone for some years, right? And when they awaken, the world is nothing at all what they remember, yet they think they've only been gone for a moment. The construct is being generated by each and every one of us.
So you're suggesting that it's a co-created reality and that we're all subjectively experiencing it. But if that person goes out of commission for a few years, the world goes on. They are still being taken care of. Like if you close your eyes, the world around you doesn't cease to exist. Like that sounds solipsistic.
Oh no, but I'm not talking about closing the eyes. That's an oversimplification. And even though we think,
the comatose patient though has closed their eyes, but the world still.
The comatose patient is real to us that are awake, but we have no existence for the comatose patient.
Let me read this definition: solipsism.
Go on, yeah.
The theory that all that is known to exist is one's own consciousness. And
I can't see any other way around it.
I reject solipsism for a few reasons, though. I think solipsism is being introduced into the world stage to prevent people from becoming objectivist. I would contend that auto-hoaxers are the only objectivists in the world. And so solipsism is purely subjectivist. And I think there may be an overlap here, that there may be some subjective input into the objective. But to say that it's all the result of consciousness kind of negates the existence of everybody else.
Oh, no. That's an extreme form of solipsism. It's a participatory solipsism. But we have to acknowledge.
But this is the thing. If you're going to suggest that, and this is why I'm studying magical philosophies, because I want to understand the mechanism. But if you're going to suggest this is true, then you're basically saying you're a wizard. That you are.
So I say I'm a wizard?
Are you a wizard? Are you a wizard?
You're Tim Osman.
No, I'm asking you though. Are you manifesting your reality as a wizard, consciously and actively?
I'm manifesting it right now, in speaking with you.
Fascinating. Okay, well, I again, solipsism is. I think it's an error. I had this caller yesterday who suggested that he can't verify anything happened before he was born. And to me, that's tantamount to an argument from ignorance. Like, just because you don't know doesn't mean it's not known or it's unknowable. And I'm approaching this whole problem of the world stage versus the real thing with the idea that we can know. It is knowable, and we can get rid of divine fallacies. We can get rid of any kind of subjectivism or solipsism. I want to move away from that. Mandela affected. are all solipsists. It's a dead end.
Yeah, that's extreme solipsism. That's taken to an extreme. Exactly.
Well, what's the right amount of solipsism, though?
Well, let's put it this way. In terms of rights and freedoms, my rights and freedoms end where yours begin, and vice versa.
But who
That's
regulates
how we
this?
can-
But who regulates this? Like if we're all powerful genies walking around, what's to stop me from hijacking this world like Sutter Kane in The Mouth of Madness, where this author?
Oh yes, Sutter
What-
Kane. Yeah,
what-
you
what-
know they shot that flick.
But
Yeah,
what
sorry,
would
go on, go
what
on.
would stop me from doing that? You said that my freedom ends where yours begins, but what would stop me from usurping total control if I'm a powerful genie wizard?
It's up to you, and it's up to the individual.
So nothing can stop the individual. Then where are these?
Oh no, I didn't say that nothing can stop them. I'm saying that the choice to embark on such a thing is a completely individual choice, and the ramifications, of course, are completely attributed to the individual.
So is it within the realm of possibility that I could become Doctor Evil and take over the world? There's no guardrails. There's no governance.
If that was your will, it's achievable, provided that it is your genuine will and you've got the means to do it.
I'll give it a shot. Anyway, appreciate the
You're
call.
gonna give it a shot.
Have a
It was
great.
great call. Take care, man. Thank you.
Likewise. All right, we cleared up some points from his first call. Ryler says matter precedes consciousness. Consciousness is a result of highly organized matter. I think the universe might be made of information, that it's intrinsically meaningful, and that our experience of it is an act of both perception and creation. And I'd even go so far as to say maybe the universe doesn't exist until it's experienced. Like, I don't think it's a static, dead thing, and that we're just evolved apes with big egos on top of it as it dies. And we're telling stories to ourselves to maintain some kind of delusion that we matter and that life has meaning and that there's a purpose. I disagree with that. I do think it's living. I think cosmism might explain it. Panpsychism. I think that the universe might be. But anyway, that as it relates to this conversation, what I'm talking about here is there is obviously a creative control being exerted by a monopoly. There is a worldview monopoly, which is being, I would say, used to keep mankind in a uniform worldview. So we've been turned into a hive mind. Now, does this translate into control over objective reality? It does on one level. They control how we live, how we vote, how we function in society in every way. Like we are quite literally like clay in their hands. Edward Bernays, Propaganda, The Public Mind. If you look at Netflix as an example of predictive programming done perfectly, and how their founder is a relative of Edward Bernays and Sigmund Freud, it all makes sense. Like, obviously, the unification of worldviews has given the power elite a tremendous amount of power. But does this translate through magic, for lack of a better term? Does it translate into control over reality itself? Can they change the rules? And, some people say, well, belief creates reality. And I'm like, no, it can't be the case. Because they can get billions of people to believe in moon landings. Does it make them real? No. So apparently, belief isn't enough to change objective reality. Belief alone. Okay, let us continue. Interesting conversations, though. I mean, these are fascinating points because I'm trying to figure out the significance of much of what we see, both eso and exoteric. And the fact that we're ruled by wizards and witches is like inarguable. I mean, it's like, okay, now what is their point? Are they all deceived? Are they all fooled? Are they all deluded? Or is there something to it? And that's why I went to do some investigation, and I'm doing more. I actually, when I was there, I signed up. I actually joined a coven. I haven't gone yet, but there's a place out to the west, Jemez Mountains, where there's a retreat that's a place you can basically rent a cabin for the weekends. And I don't know what's out there, but Ryler says, belief creates control, and that can steer people in the direction one needs. Yeah, at bottom line, like that quote that we had mentioned from Frank Herbert, about how about how they're not mad, they're trained to believe, not to know, because belief can be manipulated. Knowledge is dangerous. And what we're doing here with this culture that we're fomenting, a culture of non-believers, disbelievers, belief refuseniks. I'm refusing to believe if you can't provide evidence. If you don't like that, be offended. Because we don't want believers. Believers are, as an operating system, believing is inferior to knowing. And knowing makes you uncontrollable. Again, Frank Herbert, they're not mad, they're trained to believe. Trained to believe. Like the education that you get is designed to turn you into someone who is programmable. Stuart McKenzie says, belief is the enemy of knowing. You know who said that first? It wasn't Crow 77777, although that's his slogan. It was said by Aleister Crowley. Belief is the enemy of knowledge, which comports with what he also wrote about the literal belief in any of these things. In neurolinguistic programming, they describe belief as a tool. Same thing with chaos magic. I have a book here, a few books on the subject, where it suggests that belief itself is used to, in other words, even though you may be objective and attached to reality, in order to perform, quote, magic, in order to alter reality, you have to be able to temporarily believe something that's not true or that hasn't happened, but believe it enough to give this construct you form in your imagination weight. And that belief can, in this, according to magical theory and practice, belief in a hypothetical can steer it your way. But it doesn't change the nature of reality itself. So there's an important distinction here. Belief does not create reality. Moon landings are still fake despite believers. There's a few other points here that I've been studying, though, that I want to talk about at some point here, having to do with what they call spellcraft and the magic circle I talked about. It's all intriguing, and I think it's worth studying because it's inculcated into all of the movies. All this occult stuff, mumbo jumbo, symbols. It's pervasive. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hey, Tim, it's Gematria 101.
Hey, what's up, Gematria 101? Always great comments from you, by the way. Thanks for calling in.
Yeah, I just don't think that it's good when someone calls in and then people kind of want to rag on them, because I think that will make other people less likely to call in, even if they didn't have good points.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we should be polite to callers. And, we have a peanut gallery here, but, you never know what someone has. And one of the reasons I have this open platform is we know we can't trust centralized sources of news, and every person is an observer. So I'll take anybody's call because they may have something, a piece to the puzzle. So it's like I don't like to dismiss anybody.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have all types of topics that I could kind of go over, but you were talking about like a circle and a spell earlier.
Oh, yes.
So like the English language, if you actually put it in a circle from A to Z in a circle, and you remove all of the vertically symmetrical letters, so like that would be A, M, O, because they're mirrors from left to right. When you do that, you end up with groups of letters that are left over. You end up with 3, 1, 4, 1, and 6, which is pi, which is a line across a circle. That's how you figure out the circumference of the circle. It's 3.1416 times that line. So we're told that pi is 3.14. or 3.141, but true pi is actually 3.144. And there are 3,144 counties in the United States. The Gregorian calendar started October 4th. They actually skipped 10 days, so the Gregorian calendar starts on October 15th, 1582. So if you actually didn't jump those 10 days and you go 441 years and 3 days, which is true pi reversed, it's actually October 7th, 2023, which was the day of the Israeli conflict.
Okay.
So they're
Go on. This is intriguing.
they're symbolically using that circle that you were talking about in ways that we don't quite understand. And the two biggest events, at least in modern history, would be 3/11 and 9/11. So if you were to take a circular calendar, which that's actually what a calendar is a big circle, even though we're trained to read a calendar from left to right and then go down a row left to right, just like we read letters from left to right. But on the other side of the world, they do the mirror of that. So when you put 3/11 and 9/11, when you mark those on a circular calendar and you go from one to the other, you have a straight line across a circle, which once again is representing pi. On a calendar or even on a clock, the hour hands would be 180 degrees away from each other. And it's kind of interesting because your name's Tim Osmond. My birthday is 3/10, which is actually Bin Laden's birthday.
Oh, really?
And you almost have the real Bin Laden's name, right? So I don't think that's a coincidence either, because they literally strategically gave that character the birth date and then had him pull the event basically 180 degrees from the event he supposedly pulled off.
Oh, okay. Now that's intriguing. So what do you make of, 9/11 happens, 33-year-old Mohammed Atta attacks. He's the lead hijacker. 90 days prior was 6/11. 6/11, 33-year-old Timothy McVeigh was just executed, and he's the domestic equivalent to an Osama bin Laden. So you have 6/11, the American Osama, 9/11, Osama Association. So the 3/11, 9/11, 6/11, these are all really interesting because they're all, of course, spaced out accordingly.
It kind of doesn't stop there, because when you actually take the golden ratio 1.618, you round it up a little bit. When you convert that to days, it's 162 days. 6/11 is the 162nd day, depending on whether it's a leap year or not. You're basically right there. So we have 3/11, 6/11, 9/11, and then if you go to 12/11, 12/11 is Human Rights Day, which once again is just mockery in our face, because that was strategically done, because it lands on this plus sign that fits perfectly over a circle. And 12/11 is the 345th day of the year, which would represent mathematically a 3-4-5 triangle, which is how you find square. So on the Freemason compass and square, you have the square, which you find the square with the 345 or 3-4-5 triangle, and then 180 degrees from that, you have the 162nd day, which is shown with the compass, because that's representing the degrees where it would land, because the golden ratio basically, that's what governs like our entire reality. Basically pi, the golden ratio, phi. So like phi, you have 1.618, and then you have lowercase phi or phi, which is 0.618. So it's the same number, it's just missing the 1 in front of it. Phi, 1.618 with a capital P, and phi with a lowercase p, hi, 0.618. Those are the ratios of a 5-pointed star. That's why we have stars on our flag, and that's why the country was founded in Phi Ladelphia.
So what does it say to you? When you're looking, so I'm looking here at a video that shows the hidden pi. And then we look at the calendars, and we look at the significance of dates to these events and birth dates of celebrities like Jurassic Liars. Garrow's pointed out a million examples of this. So clearly, it would seem to me, and maybe you agree, that at the top of the pyramid, the metascriptors are all operating with the same framework and the same ciphers, the same code. And in some way, they're all these scripts are aligned with the astrotheological template, but it seems like even our language itself could even be a quote magical. Well, I mean, it kind of is. If you look at the origin of letters and in like runic scripts, and you can find examples of where, yeah, or even in the Kabbalah, the assumed magical significance of letters. So it's like this is the source code we're talking about, the source code of reality from that perspective. But I mean, what do you think? You think this is all the result of, as I would say, man using these models and templates to encode meaning, or do you think there might be an interface with something higher, as others will say?
So I think it all comes down to like really like natural law, like I was just saying, and these certain degrees and ratios that like everything is based off of. So on the back of a dollar bill, you have the pyramid with the all-seeing eye. That pyramid, if you actually divide that up into quarters, and it has a total of 36 rows, the all-seeing eye at the top would be the first 9. The bottom row would be the 36th row. I mean, it keeps going infinitely, but like just, it would basically be like the 9 would be a quantum of the 36. The 36 would be a quantum of the 72. The 72 would be a quantum of the 144. So basically you end up with a triangle with 36 rows. It's divided into 9 sections. Our language is supposed to have 27 letters because it's 3 times 3 times 3. That's why Hebrew has a total of 27 letters, 22, and then you basically have consonants, and then vowels are used like in secondary ways. So you end up with like a total of 27. All of that basically breaks down to like triangular math. That's why there's a big deal with like Q, because when you go to the 17th row, the triangular number is 153. When you go to the 26th row, which would be our whole alphabet, or Z, it's 351. 153, 351, those are mirrors of each other. And just to like talk about the significance of triangular math, 351, which is our whole alphabet. I live in Massachusetts. Massachusetts has 351 cities and towns. The zip code, I'm actually in the first town alphabetically in the entire state. The zip code ends in 351. The area code 351 is in Massachusetts.
Okay, now go on, because this is consistent. Then it reminds me of what Garrow does with how he looks into even the zip codes and the names of places.
It's all designed.
Mm-hmm. Well, one more point here.
It's all designed from day one.
Because one of the things that's consistent with magic ritual in the Western occult traditions is the ritual performance. It's a theater performance. It's pageantry, but it's all encoded. The numbers,
Yep.
the time, the color, the words they use, the numbers that the words add up to. It's all super encoded, and their belief is that the spell's power is the result of how concentrated the message is. This goes like the theory behind sigil magic. So the more meaning you can encode into something, the more powerful or more weight it has when it comes to having an effect. That's why I say I think the universe is made out of information and meaning, and that the perception / experience of it is the co-creative process, or at least where our input comes in. And I think that's at least how it's explained in these various magical philosophies. But the idea here, of course, is that there is a belief in the intrinsic power of encoding meaning into things, including the dates and the time and everything.
Yeah, for sure. Something that I just learned not too long ago. So the supposed name Delaware, that came from, I believe, somebody's name. But the word del is basically when you're figuring out, say you're trying to figure out like the corner of a triangle and like the distance of 3 points, that's actually what Del is. So, I mean, if you just look at the first state, because Delaware was the first state in the country, I mean, just the name alone, it's like Delaware. Like, are you aware of Del? I mean, it's like so in your face once you actually start to see it.
It's like a cornerstone.
Even Del is basically when you're factoring. Usually, when you do a math equation, you have two numbers that you're working with. But Del is actually when you bring in a third. So it'd be like, distant, height, length.
Okay.
Instead of just,
Okay.
9 plus 7 or whatever. So, I mean, the word Del is basically, that's like another level of mathematics
And
that people
speaking,
just
yes.
don't.
Well, and there's this thing with architecture too we should bring up, because we talk about secret societies and Freemasons. The reason they're called Freemasons is that they used stonework and cathedral building as an analogy for building character, building a perfect society, building or developing spiritually. It's all analogy, but they use the terminology of masonry. So it's like square, the plumb, the compass, and these things are all just symbols they use. But it's a pretty clear thing that within predictive programming you have both the written stuff, the movies, the stories, but you also have architecture, and architecture, monuments, the layout of cities. So this is all just part of what is done here. It's part of the big.
To the right.
Yeah.
To the right person that's aware of math on these different levels, they could literally look at like how a town is laid out, and they could perceive a message from that another person would think is completely insane, because they're not aware of that level of math. Just like how 311, in base 8 counting, 311 is 201. And then we got like the moon landing on the 201st day, event 201. The original pandemic was on, the first confirmed case of the Spanish flu was on 311. And it was 102 years prior, which is just 201 in reverse. And the reason, getting back to the letters, the reason why they use 102 and 201 is because in the Hebrew language, the mirroring of 153 and 351 in English, their mirror point is 102 and 201. And originally, the Hebrew letters, a Hebrew letter is basically a flame that is being observed from 11 different points. And it's that vantage point of that shape, but from a different dimension. So it's like the symbolism in letters has been there forever. And like in English, we basically have our letters are in the design of when you square a circle, which if you're going to find pi, because technically pi is like an irrational number that you can't quite put your finger on, the way that you find the straight line across a circle is by putting a square inside it and then putting multiple squares and different shapes within that to actually find the center point of the circle. And every single letter of the alphabet lines up with those cross sections to get to pi. And the only letter that doesn't line up or has an extra line in it that's not in that equation is the letter Q, because it's giving you a clue that Q is the reflection point of English. And that's why P and Q, which are next to each other in the alphabet, are mirrors of each other.
Fascinating. I found an article. There's a number of videos if people want to look it up. The pi alphabet clock. There's quite a few people who have looked at the hidden pi. And, this is fascinating. Like, everybody's played cards. Everybody's used playing cards. And the 52 cards represent the 52 weeks, 4 suits, 4 seasons. Add all the pips, you get 365. And then you can get into even more detail about the lunar months. And so the point of it is, this astrotheological cult runs the world, and it's in everything. And it's esoteric. It's not meant for you to see it. But if you've been shown the light, you can't not see it once you've been shown. And the society that we live in is a society in darkness by design. We are purposefully kept in the dark and, quote, hoodwinked about the true meaning of anything along these lines. And so it's just hidden. But anyway, you're onto something here. And this alphabet clock is fascinating. And one more point here, really quick here. What do you think of this? Stephen Hawking, born 3/14. Einstein dies March 14th. No, I'm sorry, other way around. Hawking's died on Pi Day.
Born yet.
And then Einstein is, he was born on Pi Day, and he died at 70. I think they both died at 76. But anyway, you can kind of see there's a significance to dates. We talk about these birth dates and these various historic personages, and these are not coincidental. These are always codes.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way.
Well, hey, Gematria 101, thank you for calling. We always get your comments in chat, always very interesting and intriguing material here. So I appreciate it. Anything else?
Nah, good talk, Tim.
All right, good. We'll call back anytime. Thank you.
All right, later.
All right. Always good to hear from people who've been in the chat forever. And the reason we delve into this is not that we're like new age or paranormal, but that the world is paranormal. And the world stage, the false model, is a multi-layered construct with an exo and an esoteric version. And society has been hoodwinked. When I say hoodwinked, it means programmed. They pulled the wool over your eyes. You got a bad interpretation or not the full picture. If you're not including in your assessment of the worldview that you're shown psyops and special effects and fakery, you will never arrive at the truth. You will never see it for what it is. Diana South says, great call, very interesting. Agreed. Interesting topic. And I've had a long-term interest in all of this. When I was in the military, I was part of this correspondence course from a Kabbalah cult out in Los Angeles called the BOTA, Builders of the Adytum, which meant Inner Temple. Their symbol is a cube. I could probably find them. And every week I'd be getting letters from them, and I would just be studying, the symbols, and even the tarot cards. One by one, these would be sent to me, and I'd have to color them in, learning the colors. So the BOTA, a modern mystery school. Builders of the Adytum, an authentic mystery school founded in 1922, based on the Western mystery traditions. Members receive weekly lessons in tarot, Kabbalah, gematria, astrology, alchemy, and other related disciplines. Adytum is a Greek word that means inner shrine. Really fascinating material. There's a free booklet called The Open Door, which maybe I'll put a link if anyone wants to read this. It's been a while since I've looked at this specifically. However, what I learned from this is that the basic thing is that our subconscious mind is a passive receiver of everything that's in your periphery that you don't notice, and that we are always being communicated to, and that we take in way more information than we could ever know, and that our ability to interact with it is impeded by a lack of a language to communicate with what you would call your higher self, or this egoless mind that resides beneath your awareness, but is the repository of so much of the junk they data dump into your head. And so the idea with the tarot cards, they called them keys in the school, and they said if you memorize the keys, the first 22 cards, what you're actually getting from Zero, the Fool, or Truman, to the World, 21, what you're getting in this study is you're seeing a pictorial journey of the evolution of an individual's soul to total knowledge of itself. So the Fool's about to walk off a cliff, and he's got a dog behind him. And I think Jim Carrey's a dog catcher in the number 23. But the card has the guy walking off a cliff, and I was told the meaning of it is that the ground below represents the subconscious, and the Fool's journey into that begins when he steps off this cliff. So here's an image of it, and this is the very start. The dog may be warning him or something, but he's walking off the cliff oblivious. And so the idea is he's so foolish. He's got his head in the clouds. He's going to trip and fall. That's the exoteric. That's the mundane version. But the esoteric is the fool is at the beginning point of wisdom. He has recognized that he knows nothing. That's why the number is 0. He is an empty vessel or a blank slate for what comes next, getting rid of any presuppositions that might prevent him from seeing what things really are. Like if your presupposition is mainstream news is the truth, you will never see what's behind it all. You have to be willing to entertain the idea that maybe you know nothing. Maybe you don't know as much as you think, or maybe everything you know is right, but your perspective is wrong. And another card, the Hanged Man, I was told the meaning of that is simply about inverting your perspective. A lot of this stuff, a lot of their teachings are really a form of almost psychotherapy in a way. But the concept here is that by having a visual language for communicating through symbols, you would be able to establish a better ability to communicate with your subconscious, and this is intrinsic to the idea of magic. It's the idea of psychic wholeness. The symbol of the eclipse you often see, like Carl Jung popularized this, like the sun is the waking life, the conscious, the awareness, the moon is the lunar, the subconscious, the dreaming mind, but that the purpose of this life, or one of the goals of the aspirant here, would be to merge the two, to shine the light in the dark places, to remove the hoodwink. Okay, moving on. We have about 5 more minutes. I want to say thanks to all the callers. Again, if you didn't get the newsletter this morning, I put out a link if you want to join the IPR Press Club. The IPR Press Club is the next phase, and this is going to happen before the newspaper gets out there. And then shortly after that, AH 2024, the Planet Killer asteroid, should be arriving. Dirk says, Tim, I have an ex-CDN hockey player friend who was allowed in the Illuminati. Please interview him on your show. Yeah, get him in touch. I will definitely put that in my notes right now. Now, when we say Illuminati, what are we talking about? To me, we're talking about mostly like it's just a conspiracy theory, rumor. There's a real group, but is there an Illuminati? And I would say, yeah, definitively. There is a class that knows. And then there's a class that believes. The knowers are far outnumbered, and then most of the class of the programmers are still part of the programmed. But there would be some who are fully in the know, and you could call them Illuminati, and I think it would be accurate for a lot of reasons. You know, 1776, May 1st, 1776, America founded, Tower of Babel's construction begins. That's also the day the Illuminati was founded. MSO Win says BOTA is very interesting. Yeah, the BOTA is a great correspondence course-based way to study this stuff. It's not all that culty. It's just a lot of good information, but it's easy to assimilate it when you get weekly lessons instead of a big, thick tome. Stuart says, I've wondered for a long time what the dog reference is in the esoteric. Well, the dog is the dog star, of course, because it's the little dog. I mean, the Canis Majoris, the big dog. The dog star has an association with the occult for a few reasons. For one, and this is what I was saying to the previous caller, how at some level they're all in on this, and we're all like playing cards. We didn't know that playing cards had an esoteric meaning. Every New Year's, the dog star reaches its highest point at midnight, and then it drops. As we count down and the ball drops in Times Square, that's a ritual to Sirius and its descent. Sirius is also associated with the New Year in the Egyptian New Year calendar, where it's like the heliacal rising. You know, it rises above the sun, and it marks the beginning of the year. 9/11, another New Year's Day, with some interesting Sirius associations. But as far as the dog as being a symbol here, there's a few things. There's the dog-headed god Anubis, guide to the underworld, which may have some associations. The underworld being the subconscious, the guide to the journey. So the Fool's card, you could look at that dog as representing that. The dog star is the god star. And every Masonic Lodge has a star, a big pentagram behind the altar. That star represents what they call the blazing star. Ollie Goering says the penguins are somewhat illuminated. Yeah, the Penguinati. Okay, it's just about 8 o'clock, so I have to get out of here. We will be continuing this conversation tomorrow. If you're subscribed to the newsletter, you'll get the archives in your email. And also, I would suggest joining the press club. If you don't have a press pass, it's not a big deal right now. I'll get you one. But the point of it is, we are amassing above ground. We are no longer going to be confined to the metaverse where we can be targeted for censorship. We'll be out of their reach. And a lot of the people who only exist in the metaverse couldn't cut it in the real world. People like these anonymous people, anonymous truthers, don't exist in the real world. All right, this is MVP, Mr. Matty Moses, PGA and Symbia, Penguinati. Thank you for joining. I'll see you all tomorrow.
They can't stop me, but they keep on trying to keep denying that they got all of the minds prying on our personal lives as the lies unfold. Truth is sitting around waiting for some truth to be told, but let it be known that we are the hoax. Questioning things of that'll take you out of your comfort zone. I'm not saying I know there's no dome, but it kinda feels like going right back to the globe. While the shepherds fight to fleece the flock, the doomsayers debate about their doomsday clock. Some say we're in a cult of believers, but how we in a cult when we're nothing but leaders? Think and let think, man, you know that's the credo. We keeping that in mind everywhere that we go.
Day after day we open the doors of perception, finding more and more of the damned action. Armed with minds to unlock the hidden answers, interested in research, journalistic freelancers. Having left behind any model-specific proposition, opened eyes believing through direct observation. Having left the realm of fairy tales and fiction, sharpened beaks pointing the right direction. Making use of the tools we have at hand to fight against ignorance across all lands. Smashing absurdity with blue branches, uncovering idiocy and distributing pink branches. Separating the wheat from the chaff, enabling the think tank with your tragedies. Follow patterns and make us yawn, badly acting human shields that randomly spawn. We do in fact call BS on your fabricated anecdotes. Moving on without you, not even leaving notes. Activating infinite potential, lying fallow people waking up, speaking what they know. We recognize your fakes, empty the frames. We have looked through all your fancy games. Your green screen doesn't impress us anymore. Your fear tactics acting weaker despite fake gore. Not accepting false dichotomy thought cages, thinking freely from our hearts, writing pages. Entries to the book of life so keen, walking a new passes and lands unseen. Walking a new passes and lands unseen.